All right, everybody, here we go. A little strange start to the day. Let me see if I can get this figured out. We'll get close. All right, there we go. As you can see, we have Michael Compton filling in for Isaiah. He was sick yesterday. He is out today, so we have a lot to get through. Obviously, it's primary day. Welcome to the show. A great job. I think he was talking about Hawley, Eric Schmidt, Smith, Jason Smith.
Yeah.
So he gave them all glowing endorsements.
Burleson, I think, was mentioned.
Burleson might have been mentioned, exactly. So he comes out in favor of Rick Bratton. I wonder what Mr. Burks thinks of that, because he was right at the end of the show yesterday, if you were paying attention. He goes, and Rob, I know you've been critical of Donald Trump. We got to talk about that, because I could tell he was a big Donald Trump fan. It just seemed that way based on the conversation. And then, the night before the election, he thinks he's in a dead heat. I believe he's in a dead heat. And then Trump comes out and endorses Rick Bratton along with Speaker Mike Johnson. The world is crazy.
I don't know how much people really put into those, because again, we know that Donald Trump doesn't know anything about Bratton.
See, this is what I was going to have this conversation with Isaiah too. I'll have it with you. I think that you're right with people that know what's going on in the world.
That's true.
But I always think that about 90% of the population has no idea what's going on politically. And I mean none. They just go, okay, I'm watching Fox News. I love Jesse Waters. Jesse Waters loves Mike Huckabee. Therefore, I love Mike Huckabee. I think this is the way the world works. Unfortunately, I think this is the way the world works. So when they just did a report on CNN, I think it was, or maybe it was Fox News. One of the I saw a clip of it. I didn't keep it, but it was going through all of the recent endorsements of Donald Trump, and they all win.
Yeah,
they all win. And then we had this guy. Who was it? It was with the Massey race.
Yeah.
So as soon as Donald Trump endorsed the opponent, that was basically the end of it, because he was so popular in that district. So that's what took out Massey.
Yeah, and Trump did win pretty much every county by double or triple.
Yeah. Well, he's popular.
He's very popular in Missouri.
He's popular.
If you don't know anything about any of the guys running, that probably would be a big plus if you're a Trump fan. So
that's kind of what I think too. So now I have to give the prediction that Rick Bratton will be a new U.S. Congressperson by the end of the day. I think that ends the conversation as far as I'm concerned.
He'll still have to take on Cleaver, the Democrat, in the fall, but with the new district, he's probably got the path paved for him now. So
sounds to me like he's a shoo-in now. I can't remember why I got upset with Rick Bratton. I think it was remember when the Freedom Caucus kicked him out? And I remember I was very upset with Rick Bratton and his chief of staff, Tom Estes. What was it? What was the bill?
There's been a few things, I think, that were along that. When we did the hand counting demonstration, Allie and set it up down there, Tom Estes put out that post about this will never happen, blah, blah, blah. So there was that incident, and Bratton never came back out and said, no, I disagree with that or anything. He just let that set. And then I think the big thing was the stadium bill. And that's what finally got him kicked out of the Freedom Caucus.
Well, it's interesting because Nicola, who we'll have on the show tomorrow, Joe Nicola, senator from Missouri, he's endorsing Rick Bratton, as I understand it, as well. And I thought the friction in that stadium bill was between Bratton and Nicola at the time.
Well, the way that we heard that it went down was Bratton cut a deal that cut Jackson County out of that deal. And so not just that Nicola would still endorse him. I find it, because now Jackson County is in this new district that he's running for Congress on. I would find it hard that anybody in Jackson County would want to support him after that whole ordeal. But I guess people's memories are short.
I think they take advantage of short memories. I really do. Well, I guess we'll ask Joe Nicola on tomorrow. He's got a piece out talking about how we communicate with one another, how we
that was an excellent piece.
Excellent piece. I like Joe Nicola. I like his chief of staff, Jody. I like these people. So we'll have him on tomorrow. We'll kind of recap what goes on today within the primaries. You want to make any predictions before we get into the meat of the show?
I'm just praying for that God will open hearts and minds, and we will see good conservative results today. I think that the amendments 4 and 5 will go down. I'm more positive. I'm more sure that 5 will go down than 4. 4 might be closer.
But you think 5 goes down?
I think 5 goes down.
Can we put on the screen the people that are behind it? I think. Let me.
I think you'll have to do it. It's up there. It's in favor of 5 is how it's labeled there.
So here it is. Yeah. So took this off the internet. So these are the people and groups that are behind Amendment 5 in the state of Missouri. So let me read these off to you. And, I always say, if you want to know where people stand, you have to see in politics. Unfortunately, I have a lot of people that I consider not friends necessarily, but I'm friendly with, who no longer have anything to do with me. They don't answer questions. They don't respond to text messages. They really don't respond to me at all because of associations that I have. These people that I'm associated with attack some of these politicians. It's not coming from me, but I'm not, I can't tell people what to say or what to think or what have you. I just, I like both sides of some of these arguments, and I like people on both sides. But because of the association, a lot of people in the Missouri Republican Party, and I would call them now establishment people, they won't have anything to do with me because of associations. So knowing that this is how these people think, look at the political association. So this is the group of people that are in favor of Amendment 5. Now, keep in mind that Donald Trump just endorsed Rick Bratton. I would venture to guess Rick Bratton put out a statement on social media yesterday that he had just gotten off the phone with Donald Trump and what a great guy he was and how nice he was. And it seemed to me that Rick Bratton had never spoke to Donald Trump before. It seemed like he was almost overwhelmed, like like somebody who sees somebody that they are very fond of, like a big celebrity of some sort, and they're rattled after they see this person, and they can very that's the way he seemed to me yesterday. But here, these are the groups in favor of A5. Governor Mike Kehoe, Donald Trump Jr., Laura Trump, Senator Josh Hawley, Senator Eric Schmidt, Congressman Alford, Congressman Burleson, Congressman Onder, State Treasurer Malik, State Auditor Fitzpatrick, Secretary of State Hoskins, State Attorney General Catherine Hanaway, the Missouri Freedom Caucus, the Missouri Republican Party, Freedom Principle, Americans for Prosperity, ALEC. I don't know how many people know about ALEC. We're going to do a report on them here pretty soon. Turning Point, the new Turning Point with Erica Kirk in charge. Mo Tax Relief Now, Grover Norquist, and Aaron Hedlund. So now you get to see, these are the people that are behind. Which one do I want here? I got to figure this out at some point. Bam, that's the one I want. They are the ones that are pushing A5, and A5 is, at least what we can see, and what Isaiah talks about all the time, is there's big money that is supporting A5 from behind the scenes. Very interesting how this all plays out. So A5, I think it goes down if there's a fair vote.
I think so. I think that's what it comes down to and that's kind of me and Amy. That's our barometer on how we think the elections are as far as integrity wise as A5. So
yes, I think A5 is it's kind of a bellwether test to see if Missourians trust the Missouri government or not. And from what I can tell, at least the betting odds, they have betting odds on everything right now. They say A4 and A5 really don't have much of a chance. I mean, under 20% on both of them at last look yesterday. Okay. Couple other things I wanted to get to. Let's do a just quick predictions, and I'm going to give a quick just an idea of the people that I would vote for. I've already endorsed Jen Olson. I just want to say to everybody who's listening, if we can clip this, if you can get it out, if you're voting today and you haven't made up your decision, in St. Charles County, I think it is an easy decision. You must vote for Jen Olson. Kurt Barr, there was a piece put out yesterday by Joe Brazil, who's on the St. Charles County Committee, talking about Kurt Barr. Kurt Barr has just been a thorn in the side of everybody who wants hand counting paper ballots, who wants to get machines out of the race, as I do. And Kurt Barr is the one person standing in the way. I think that is an easy decision for St. Charles County voters. It would be 100. It'd be 99% vote. I think Kurt Barr and his family and maybe a few of his friends would vote for him. Anybody else that wants to have the knowledge that they have real elections in St. Charles County and understanding the power of St. Charles County too. So as St. Charles County goes, sometimes so does the conservative movement in the state of Missouri. So a Jen Barr full-throated endorsement for I keep saying Jen Barr. I'm all over the place. Jen Olson. Damn it. Jen Olson is the easy vote for me in St. Charles.
To see make it. There is let's see. Well, we had Ryan on yesterday.
Ryan Hagedorn. I got a lot of feedback from Ryan Hagedorn, just FYI. Some people were texting me again this morning. Apparently, this lady sent me something this morning, and she goes, Ryan is not going to win. And she laid out why, and she claims that the people in his district they like him, but they believe that he does not live in his district. And they said that they don't. That's according to this lady that texted me this morning. She said it's not that we don't like Ryan. It's not that we don't think he's a likable character, she said, but we know the situation of where he lives, and he has not been honest with us. And we don't want data centers. We're not for data centers either, but we also don't want people to not be straight up with us. And that's the take on it.
I think that can be a big factor. I mean, we've got the same thing with going back to Rick Bratton. He does not live in the new district that he's running in either. So I know that upsets me when I find out something like that. So I don't know the details on Ryan's or what the deal is.
He dismissed it out of hand yesterday. He said, Rob, it's just a lie. These are people that are just coming after me. So he just dismissed it out of hand. But these people that are starting these, and I looked at it yesterday with Isaiah. It does appear, at least from what you can see publicly, that Ryan Hagedorn has a rental home in the district that he would be voting. But these people say that is not where he resides. He resides on a farm about 30 miles away from his voting district or something of this nature. I don't want to get in the middle of it.
Yeah.
I like Ryan Hagedorn. I'm rooting for him. I don't know his opponent, but I like anybody that's against AI data centers from whatever district they come from. So for me, that would trump maybe a little discrepancy on where his district is. But that's just my take on that situation. Anybody else?
Dusty Blue. We shouldn't forget Dusty Blue, and Sam Alexander is also running for the Senate in the Sedalia, Pettis County, going down to Warsaw. That's kind of his area where he would be representing.
Gotcha. All right, so we got some people we're rooting for. Very, very interesting to see how the day plays out. I'm interested in A4. I'm interested in A5. I'm very interested in Jen Olson's campaign against Kurt Barr. I think that's a big one.
For everybody in the state. That's one that we all need to be paying attention to, because I mean, the only people in St. Charles get to vote on it, but it would mean a lot for the rest of the state too if she wins and is able to do what she's planning on doing with the hand counting there.
Exactly. It allows us finally to have a glimpse of what hand counting paper ballots would look like. Linda Rance put forth a process to count votes by hand to get it in timely. It seems like it's relatively simple to understand. So you've got Linda Rance, who does the hand counting paper ballots. I happen to like Linda. I went out and spoke with her. Some of the people in my circles have back and forth with Linda, but she's been very kind to me. She's been very generous to me. She made a big donation to People's Lobby. So I like Linda Rance. I like Jen Olson. I like the idea of having confidence in elections. I think without it, I've said it might be.
If Jen Olson wins and St. Charles County does hand counting, it'll be impossible for the other counties to say we can't do it, because St. Charles is one of the biggest counties in the whole state. So
let me give you this. How do you eat an elephant? I tell everybody all the time, it's just one bite at a time. So you got to get the big voting county in St. Charles County. You get Jen Olson in there. Jen Olson shows how to count ballots by hand. That's her whole campaign strategy, is counting paper ballots by hand. And then it'll start to spread. And then once you get your government back, and I've said it 1,000 times, people want me to run for office. People in my life want me to run for office. It's been that way since I was a kid, because I love talking politics. I'm into it. Why don't you run for office, Rob? And I thought about it when I was younger. There wasn't enough money in it. I would not be on the take, so you couldn't buy me off. So I was making a lot of money in the private sector. So I had no interest in getting into politics, primarily for financial reasons. But I look at it now and I think, okay, well, now I'm 56. If I wanted to run for office in the state of Missouri, I'm interested in that now. I would consider doing that, but not in this election system. There is no way that Rob Carter would walk around and beg for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for the role that I was going to run in, not having any faith in the election system. I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't raise that kind of money and get it for my friends, family, corporate people that I'm involved with. I just wouldn't be able to do it.
I think there's a lot of other good people that would also consider running too, and won't for this very same reason. And I think we'd see more people participate as far as going out to vote if they, I hear too often, I hear people say, I just don't think my vote matters. And if we have that attitude, it's understandable that we'd see a 20% turnout. Although I did go to vote this morning, and my local polling place was pretty full at 7 o'clock in the morning. And talking to our county clerk here, she said that early voting was the highest they've ever seen for an off-year primary. And
don't you take a lot of pride in that?
Yeah, and I think some of the other reports I'm getting from people around the state are saying that looks like there's a good turnout this morning. I think that's probably driven by 4 and 5. I think
yes,
that's
and a lot of attention and a lot of conversation. I think people are more It's not that they can be more educated, because you can only be so educated on something you can't quite understand.
Yeah.
Because when you read the language to a layperson who's not an attorney, it's hard to make head or tails of it. We have to go by what they tell us it's going to do, and unless you're an attorney or a very astute person, when it comes to political language, you got to trust just a little bit.
Even the sponsor can't tell you what A5 is going to end up being. Correct. Because they haven't written that part yet. It's really the Nancy Pelosi.
Pass it so we can find out what's in it. All right, let me get the show rolling. So let me put this like this, Mike. I'm going to put you in the corner. So today's show, because there's not really much to talk about until the polls are done tonight. We can talk about the results tomorrow. I have a show scheduled for today that does not talk about Missouri politics very much. We'll have Rick Bavitz. I think he's coming in at 11. If he doesn't, we'll get back to Missouri politics. But the theory of the day and the show title of today was CIA and the Media Machine. And, what I've been wanting to do lately is kind of just explain. It's really nice that you're in, Mike, because I'll walk you through what I have been noticing. And I don't think that many people, when they watch corporate television, understand what the Mockingbird Press is. They see these clips where you'll see all of the local news anchors repeating the same story over and over and over again. Many people have seen those clips where it doesn't matter whether it's ABC, whether it's Fox, whether it's CBS, doesn't matter. You'll see the same language across all of the local affiliates from coast to coast, and people they think that's the Mockingbird Press. And it is to a degree. If you look at local news, what seems to be happening is somebody originates a story, it filters down into the local press, and they all repeat the same thing because they're just reading script. But when you get into the corporate press, now the corporate press, with the advent of CNN in like 1980, 81, this is where mass misinformation began at a major scale. And I am somebody who is a victim of Fox News. I consider myself a victim of Fox News. I am somebody who said, oh, I'm just so tired of liberal press. And then Fox News comes out with Bill O'Reilly and Hannity and Combs and that whole group. And they started talking about conservative issues that I was interested in, and it caught my attention. And because I was so disillusioned with the liberal press, I immediately gravitated toward Fox News. And then what Fox News did to me, it's like grooming a child. They're like predators. They groom you. They tell you just enough to get you to go, yep. Honey, how many? We've been talking about that for how long? And you start screaming at your significant other about what's going on within Fox News, and it sucks you in. And then as you become a Fox News viewer, and you know how they are, Mike, I don't know if you were this way at some point, but people that watch Fox News, they'll watch it all day long. I did that for 15 or 20 years. It was on all day long.
Well, we're the same age group, so growing up, we had nothing but the liberal news, and so when Fox News finally came, it was like finally somebody's there that understands what I'm interested in and my point of view, and I mean that's exactly what happened.
It was like hallelujah, right?
Yep. And
then you get addicted to it, and then but the way I see it, and the way I call it grooming, is they talk about a lot of things that are important to conservatives. They wrap themselves in the flag. I think most conservatives are very patriotic by nature. I think they're God-centered. Most people coming from the right are God-centered. But then what they started to do over time, if you pay attention to their programming, is they conflate war. Every time there's a war, they conflate war with patriotism. Mm-hmm. And I don't think necessarily going to war is always patriotic. Sometimes resisting war is patriotic. If the Nazis had their population screaming, no war. You guys are lying to us. No war. Maybe we don't have World War II. Maybe we have a completely different world. Maybe it's made in a different shape had we not had the propaganda in Nazi Germany and the propaganda now that I think it's really easy for me to see that comes out of Fox News. But I think what people don't recognize are the people involved. So I want to show people how I look at news, and I'll just give you a couple of examples. So if you don't mind, let's start with clip number 1. And it's this is here. So I have it on my side, right? Yeah. So let me bring in clip number 1 and let me set it up for you. Many people are talking about it. This is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and he is talking to Dana Bash. Now, Dana Bash, you will recognize her as a CNN anchor. She's been around for a long time. But does anybody know who Dana Bash is? Does anybody know her background? Does anybody recognize what her motives might be? I don't think they do. I think they see Dana Bash. They think journalist. Let's just talk to Dana Bash. Let's see what she's got to say. I like her show. I like the way she looks and what have you. But I want to explain who Dana Bash who she is in just a second. But let me play this clip. This went viral. Everybody's talking about it. This is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. giving the screws to Dana Bash on CNN about COVID. Check this out.
Job is telling the truth to the American people.
I see my job as telling the truth, and the truth is that there is study after study after study. It's one of the most studied things out there in science.
You're repeating
and it
it
is
like a parrot. You're repeating
So are
it
you.
like a parrot.
So
I've actually read the science. Let's you and I come back here and debate the science.
I'm not debating this with you.
Of course you won't.
No, because I'm not
all
debating.
All you know how to do is repeat things that people told you and say, trust the experts. That's what you did during COVID. Now we know that Anthony Fauci, who was the expert, was lying about everything, about masks, about social distancing, about natural immunity, about the transmission from the vaccine, about the source of COVID. He was lying, and you were punishing people for not trusting the experts. And now you're rolling out the experts again to talk about something that you have no personal knowledge of.
Okay, well, guess what? That is my job, to talk to people.
Your job is to tell the truth to the American public.
Yes, and my job is to get as much information as I can.
And to maintain a posture of fierce skepticism.
What we were doing in COVID and still, with regard to these vaccines, is getting the best information, the best science that we can.
All right, so that's Dana Bash. You get a sense of what's going on there. Now, Dana Bash obviously is backpedaling. I think most people who watch that go, what's going on with Dana Bash? Something's up. Something doesn't make any sense. She's acting just a little bit strange. Let me get back to here with you. So that's Dana Bash. Now, Dana Bash, if you look up Dana Bash, she was married to a guy named Jeremy Bash. And I'm going to walk through this with you real fast. So she gets her name from a guy named Jeremy Bash. Jeremy Bash, let me find it for you. Jeremy Bash is an American lawyer who served as chief of staff at the Central Intelligence Agency. Very interesting, right? Guess where he went to school? Georgetown and Harvard. Where's my thing at here? Let me find it. Let me find it for you real fast. I want people to remember that it is a big club and you aren't in it. So let me give my schools here in just a second, but he is from the club schools. He was chief of staff at the CIA. He's married to Dana Bash, who's an anchor on CNN, who completely lied and is now trying to cover up all of the lies surrounding COVID that every person who hasn't been boosted 17 times recognizes now was a made-up story, that COVID was no more dangerous than any other kind of respiratory flu. You just needed the proper medicine for it. They rolled out the protocols with remdesivir and putting masks on people's face and have them stand on dots and isolating them. And then when they got sick, they would put them ventilators on their face and suffocate them to death. This was what happened in this country. And until that is recognized, Mike, I don't know how you move forward until that is understood.
We still haven't seen accountability for any of that.
Correct. Georgetown and Harvard is where Jeremy Bash went to school. Okay. So let me lay out the schools very quickly off the top of my head. Now, you got to remember how I got here. When I started doing my podcast, I started when I knew the experts were lying, because here's what happened to me. I'll walk you through the process, Mike. So because it's nice to have you on, because Isaiah's heard it before and you may not have. What happened was, when I was doing my original podcast, when I first started, I knew COVID was a con. I told you about the China story, so I knew COVID was a con job right from jump. And then I saw these experts coming on Fox News and CNN. And then I started seeing, primetime hosts scaring people to death with the rolling death cases and the rolling scoreboards with the deaths and the cases. And I said, okay, well, they're bringing on these experts. They must be complicit. Who are the experts that are lying through their teeth? Like Anthony Fauci and Deborah Birx and all these people. But there were like 50 of them. And you got Peter Hotez, and you have all of these people that were coming on your cable stations and lying about COVID, lying about its origins, lying about the vaccines, lying about how dangerous it was, lying about the cases, and never really explaining to people how the whole con was organized. And I'm like, well, not one person sees what Robb Carter sees. This guy that is a shoe salesman in Florida recognizes this and can see right through it, but nobody on cable news sees it. And I thought, okay, well, then there must be complicity. So I start going back, and every time they put an expert on my screen, I would look up the background of the experts. And what I started to notice was all of the experts come from the same places. They come from a handful of schools and think tanks. Number one, you got Harvard and Yale. It's a big club.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
Okay, so you're not in the big club. It was Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Johns Hopkins, Georgetown, Columbia, and Oxford. That's where the London School of Economics on occasion, but that is where all of these people came from. It was like 99% of them that were singing this tune all came from those handful of schools. I'm like, well, aren't there medical people in other schools around the world? Are the only ones that understand COVID come from a handful of schools tied to very powerful people around the world? Didn't make any sense to me. So as you look at Dana Bash, just recognize that her husband, Jeremy Bash, was chief of staff at the CIA. I don't think you have to make a real big leap to understand that these are the intelligence agencies that drip into our media, and they fool people, and there's never any accountability for it because the politicians are in line with them. It's the same group of people. It's the same game. Dr. Shiva said it best. They don't have to have a formal conspiracy. They don't have to have a formal conspiracy. They know what they're doing because these are old families. These are puppets. This group moves in the same direction because they know what the goal is. They can fight with each other. They can tell you the truth 99% of the time because a con has the 1% hidden behind your back, and that is the trap. And we recognized it with COVID. So Dana Bash, that's number one. Let's go to clip number 2. I have it on my side. Okay, so this is, as we put this up, what you're going to see is Allison Camerata. How many people from Fox News remember Allison Camerata? Allison Camerata was a conservative morning host on Fox and Friends on Fox News.
For years.
For years. She was a morning person. She was on the curvy couch. Remember that whole thing? She was on Fox News morning show. She was a conservative on Fox News. She fought for conservative ideas. She brought in the conservative guests, and she, had the love affair with all of the conservatives. And then just by a miracle from somewhere I don't understand, she goes over to CNN. And on CNN, she's a hardcore liberal, and she's agreeing with all the liberal positions. And a normal thinking person would go, well, wait a minute. Just like Bill Hemmer, just like a dozen of them. How do they go from Fox News to CNN when they're at complete odds with their ideologies? You have the Fox News group that is right-wing and conservative, and you have the CNN group which is left-wing and liberal. How can you take hosts from one to the other seamlessly and nobody recognize it? Bill Hemmer, who was the... Bill Hemmer, you have Allison Camerata, and there was who was the Lou Dobbs went from CNN to Fox. There's one time I looked it up. There's like a dozen that went back and forth. Even Bill O'Reilly was on corporate television. I think he was on channel KMOV CBS before he went to Fox News.
You had them both going both ways. Like Maria Bartiromo went from CNBC to Fox, and it's really to them. I think it's just like a baseball player changing uniforms from the Cardinals to the Cubs, and
they
I mean, that's how I know a lot of people that were loyal Fox watchers at the time felt like that. Those like the free agent just left from the Cardinals and signed with the Cubs, and
that's right. And what's interesting is you can tell they're script readers because nobody changes their ideology 180 degrees because they go from Fox News to CNN. You don't go from a conservative to a liberal overnight and then start playing the game of liberal and conservative on both major corporate outlets, CNN and Fox News. I find that to be ridiculous, and nobody should believe that. Okay, so let's get to the second clip. The second clip is Allison Camerata, and she has a guy on with her named John Avalon, and then she's bringing on the expert, Dr. Chris T. Purnell. Now, this goes back to COVID. Now, got to remember, COVID was a con job. Here's how they sold it.
We do have some breaking news. Drug maker Pfizer just announcing the results of its vaccine trial for adolescents. Its shot was 100% effective at preventing infection,
100%
sickness among 12 to 15-year-olds. This could be a major game changer for reopening schools across America. So joining us now is Dr. Chris Purnell. She's a public health physician and fellow at the American College of Preventive Medicine. Dr. Purnell, great to see you. 100% effective? Is that, I mean, John and I haven't heard numbers like that. Is that unusual to find that efficacy rate?
Well, that's even higher than what we were reported when we had 95% efficacy in adults. Look, we know these mRNA vaccines are a game changer. The technology is different. The technology is very promising.
I mean, it's 100%. I mean, it does not get any better.
Now, John Avalon is married to Margaret Hoover. Margaret Hoover is the great-granddaughter of Herbert Hoover. John Avalon is from Yale and Columbia. The guest that they bring on, this lady, Chris T. Purnell. Chris T. Purnell is from Princeton, Columbia, and Johns Hopkins.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club.
And then when you look on your television screen, let's look at how they sell it to you. Because, one of the things that if you like our show, one of the things you'll like about it is you're going to have a behind the scenes look. It's like if you watch a movie that was based on a book. Generally speaking, if you read the book first, you don't like the movie as much because there's much more detail and it creates a clearer picture in your head than when you go see the big box office movies. This is the same thing that we try to do with the show. When you're watching CNN, if you're unaware that they have an agenda, and I'm not talking about a liberal agenda, I'm talking about a lie through their teeth agenda to sell you vaccines, to sell you war, to sell books, to sell whatever they're selling, insurance, whatever they got going on. It is staged propaganda. So you got John Avalon, who is from Yale and Columbia, one of my club schools. You got Allison Camerata, who was a conservative on Fox News, who now is with CNN or was with CNN. She went from conservative to liberal, both with morning shows. And then their expert, everybody knows about Peter Hotez, or they should. That's a guy that if we ever show a picture of him, you don't want to leave with your kids anytime soon, Peter Hotez. He's another Yale guy, I believe, just lied through his teeth throughout the entire situation. But the lady on the screen, her name is Chris T. Purnell. And when you look her up, her background is Princeton, Columbia, and Johns Hopkins. Also Duke, but those are the club schools that they're involved with. And if you look at the screen, what do we got up there? Total cases. And what's funny about this, Mike, is I'm with my wife, and we were in Nashville. And story was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I looked over to my wife and I said, they're going to roll out a death scoreboard before too long. There'll be a death scoreboard up there. It'll be rolling every day. And when you look at your TV, there'll be a death scoreboard. She didn't even know what I was talking about. And then I think within that same trip or shortly thereafter, it was on there. And I said, see there? I said, I told you it was coming. I said, that's how they do it because they have to scare people to death. And in order to scare people to death, they have to have a bazillion cases. They have to show you the deaths. They have to show it to you consistently. They have to show it across all of the networks, and they have to be consistent with it so that the normal person would be scared to death to even walk outside and breathe fresh air. They have to get that mask on, and they got to wait for that vaccine and the booster, and that's how CNN does it. So they all do the same thing. It's across the board, and they do it with war. They're doing it with war now. We're watching with what's going on with Iran. If you listen to the network television or people that listen to network news, they're constantly telling you how, boy, if we just, we're going to bomb this island over here. They think they're military generals because of the media propaganda. They have no idea what's going on in Iran. They don't know anything about the culture of Iran. They don't know anything about the history of Iran. They don't know about the CIA being involved. They don't know anything about anything. But they are so convinced of their position because they get the propaganda. It seeps down into their soul, and then they repeat it, as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said to Dana Bash, like a parrot. And there you go. All right. And then the last one I wanted to play comes from ESPN. I'm a big sports fan. I like to watch football. I like to watch basketball. I like to watch baseball. Eric Burleson, by the way, hit 3 home runs against the Yankees last night. That was kind of cool for the Cardinals. That's my vice. I love sports. I get caught up in sports. I'm very competitive. I played them all, and I like to watch them. ESPN at the time, which is owned by ABC and Disney, so you got to know who the players are. So Disney, ABC, and ESPN are all one big media corporation. ESPN on a daily basis, which you think is going to be sports, turned into a news outlet and a propagandist for COVID shots, for masks. It was incredible. At that time, watching ESPN was almost unbearable for me. I couldn't stand to watch it because their entire programming was based around COVID, getting your COVID shots. Remember, these are when the games were shut down, Mike, and they had cardboard cutouts in the stands, and all the leagues were shut down, and the whole thing. Aaron Rodgers, who is going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback, he was the one who said that he was taken care of, and people thought that meant he was vaccinated. He said no, he had taken some other precautions. He was not vaccinated. The league was recommending that everybody be vaccinated, or they couldn't play, or they had to go into these protocols where they had to play football with a mask on their face, and this whole thing. It was insane. And Aaron Rodgers was a guest of one of the top hosts on ESPN. So he would come all the time. He would talk about this particular situation around COVID, and ESPN just hammered him. Stephen A. Smith, who goes on the Mark Levin show all the time. I don't know if people know that, but he goes on Mark Levin. Those two are tight, Mark Levin and Stephen A. Smith. So Stephen A. Smith, who is a basketball analyst on ESPN, I think most people, you know who Stephen A. Smith is, don't you, Mike?
Yeah, I've seen him before.
So Stephen A. Smith is he's a very famous person, into politics, paid very well through ESPN. Well, he would come on and start bashing anybody who didn't get their vaccines. And one of the people that he went after was Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving at the time was one of the top 3 basketball players in the NBA, and he was refusing to get the COVID shots playing for the Brooklyn Nets out of New York. And what happened was they said, okay, well, if you don't get your vaccines, then you can't play basketball at home games in New York because those are the new laws. You have to get vaccinated in order to be in public, basically. So Kyrie Irving said, okay, well, then I won't play in New York. I'll just play the road games. I won't play in New York because I'm not getting the vaccines. And Stephen A. Smith said that he was a bad leader, that he didn't care about his team, that he was selfish, that he thought he was the expert when the experts were wearing white coats and they were on Fox News and CNN, and just badgered this guy and tried to humiliate him day in and day out. Stephen A. Smith, a con man of the highest sort. I've been telling people that for a long time. This is a guy that will read the script and do whatever he has to do. Stephen A. Smith, not a good guy, just saying. And then he came out just recently and apologized. So 6 years after it mattered, when everybody needed Stephen A. Smith to stand up and actually not take a paycheck and stand up for all the people that were dying and being misled with COVID and being isolated from their family and friends, now he comes out just a little bit late. You know, Mike, I think just a little bit late. But here's how Aaron Rodgers addressed it, because Aaron Rodgers went after ESPN because now they need to talk to Aaron Rodgers. He's still in the league. He's still one of the most popular quarterbacks in the league. So he goes on these shows and he finally got after ESPN. So here is quarterback Aaron Rodgers, who I didn't like for the longest time. But when he spoke out against COVID, I found him brave, very bright, intuitive, and now I'm a fan of Aaron Rodgers. I hope he goes to the Hall of Fame, and I would like him to win another Super Bowl. That's how much I like Aaron Rodgers now. But here is his commentary most recently on ESPN. I love this.
She is an absolute criminal. I'm on.
Can you tell us about the mindset of coming into your last season? Like, that's a real thing, it feels like, because is everything better? Is everything funner? Is everything more awesome? Like, how do you kind of view this year versus maybe the years of the past?
I'm going to plead the 5th.
Okay.
Okay. Like
Gotta
that.
love that guy.
Like that absolute coward, Tony Fauci. Absolute coward.
Yeah.
Hey, it's back,
Are
baby.
you kidding me?
Yeah, 111
You got
times.
a pardon and you're in front and you pleaded over 100 times at the White House. What are you scared of, Tony?
Yeah.
I thought you were the science.
Yeah.
I thought you were. I am science, and you get up there and you can't answer a question.
Yeah.
What are we doing? And how much time did the network spend to that? How much time did they spend on my responses every week, on my vaccination status, on Taylor and Travis's wedding? Did they do even a minute? Did they do even a minute on Tony Fauci?
No, I don't think I've heard anything.
I bet they didn't.
But on that note,
And there was another scandal this offseason, too, involving a voter for MVP, for Coach of the Year. How much time did your network spend? Where's your camera? Did your network spend on
our
that?
network.
I wish I
How much time did you
Go back to
spend?
Fauci.
This is awesome. How much time?
This is awesome.
Go back to Fauci?
Yeah.
Go back to the coward Tony Fauci and his science?
Hold on now.
Who's spending the entire time writing in his diary about how fun it is to be famous? You got to be kidding me.
Okay, so on that note,
What are you going to say about me now?
Debate him,
What are you going to say about me
no,
now?
I got no debate here. You had a 500.
No, seriously, what are they going to say about me now? Now you can't talk about the COVID stuff because obviously it was made, in a lab in China. That's like not even questionable anymore. Tony Fauci is an absolute criminal. I'm on good terms with my family. I'm on good terms with my family. What are you going to say now? What are you going to say now?
I want to let you know, it's been a fun ride for you, I would assume, over the last
It's
couple.
been a great life and a great career. And it's nice to be sitting on this side now, especially after that coward played the 5th over 100 times.
Okay.
I thought you had a pardon there, Tony. Why couldn't you answer one question the entire time?
Okay,
Why
we
not?
got 4 minutes to the heart out.
Yeah, I got 4 more minutes.
And he just goes on, and I love it. Now, Mike, I say this is for me, this is the way forward. I've told everybody you can't have a corporate news outlet without guests.
Yeah.
Once the American people start to recognize that these are intelligence operations, that's all they are.
Yeah.
They're intelligence operations because the people that are in the media come from the same schools as the politicians. And you got to remember, the politicians don't even read the bills before they vote on them. As Nancy Pelosi said, we have to find out what's in them before we have to pass it before we can find out what's in it. Well, she's not joking.
No.
And I'll do a report on Nancy Pelosi. When people understand who Nancy Pelosi is, it's going to blow their mind. I mean, Nancy Pelosi has a long history that people don't know.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me how these things are coordinated behind the scenes, easy to diagnose. This doesn't take Columbo to figure out. It just say, wait a minute, I don't trust these people. Let me see what they're involved in. Let me see what their motives are. Let me see how they're connected, and then watch how they behave in public. And you'll see that they, just like Dr. Shiva said, they're just like birds. You ever see birds flying in one direction and then immediately they turn to the left? It's because they all know what they're doing.
Well, and what you're seeing with CNN and Fox is the top, but you watch the down, everybody remembers all those video clips that went viral of one station after another. They put a box up where they're saying exactly the same thing all across the country, same wording, it was, that should have set something off in people. That should have been a red pill moment for everybody that, hey, we're just watching theater here. This is
correct. Did you go through it with COVID? I mean, I like to talk to people about COVID now. You got to remember, Mike, my show started on the back of COVID. The reason I did my podcast was not to get into podcasting. I never thought it would be more than a couple months. And I honestly believe when I started my podcast that once I brought all of these things to people's attention, especially in my life, I'm not talking about, I wasn't expecting at the very beginning to have a big podcast or a big radio show or anything of that nature. I just thought I would get this information out to, because I have I know a lot of people in the shoe business, and I cared about a lot of people in the shoe business, and I have a lot of friends. I just have a lot of people in my life, and I wanted to make sure that they knew that COVID was a con job. So as I started to lay out this information, what's crazy about it is they would shake their head. Oh man, I didn't know that. I didn't know. And then they go get the vaccines. And I'm like, well, I thought we had this conversation. Why are you getting the vaccines? Oh, I had to get it for work. And they just didn't think it was any big deal at all. And then I had people dying like flies. I have a buddy of mine who's had almost 10 people in his family die. Did you have any of these issues? Did you fight with people?
Yeah. I was working in a research lab at the time. And of course, the lab is at a university. So when COVID hit, we were shut down. And so I never had a great trust in the media, but I didn't realize how bad it was until I'd sit and watch Trump's press conferences where he'd be on there for 2 or 3 hours going through stuff. And then I'd watch the nightly news, and it had nothing. I knew what they were telling me was completely different than what I watched earlier that day. And that's when I realized this is much worse than I ever dreamed. And my research career came to a halt because I wouldn't take the vaccine either. And
really, funny. I didn't know that.
But it's funny because, and in the lab that I worked in, I was the only one that never took the vaccine. I was also the only one that never got COVID.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, I hear a lot of people say that. I was listening to Peggy Hubbard. Do you know Peggy on Real Talk?
Yeah.
I was listening to her yesterday, and she was playing that clip of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Giving it to Dana Bash. And, now she is talking about all of the things. And I love Peggy. I recommend people listen to her show. I think she's funny, and I think she's talented. And she's talking about all of the things that I was talking about 6 years ago. And it's so bizarre to me that these things are easily diagnosed. They are. If you pay attention to what's going on and you have any common sense whatsoever, and you put your time and energy into it, you'll see how the media organizations are tied to the politicians. They're tied to the big corporations. They're all tied together. And nobody sees it until it's too late. Nobody sees it until they had somebody in their family get Bell's palsy and their face collapse. Nobody sees it until somebody's heart explodes. Nobody sees it until they lose their job, or they have coworkers that they can no longer talk to, or their families are split up. Once the damage is done, then everybody comes out and goes, did you know that Anthony Fauci, there were all kinds of studies out there, and Anthony Fauci dismissed them? Yeah, I was reading them on my show. Of course we knew about it. It's just that the media that you trust and that you'll still watch today, there are people that are watching me that will turn on Fox News at some point throughout this week and watch Fox News. The organization that lied to them about COVID, the organization that lied to them about the elections, they still trust to sell them war. I love it. I continue to wonder if there's any way to escape it when the information is so easy to see, and yet people still go back to what they find comfortable. Like, I got a buddy right now, just texted me. This is a buddy of mine that I've known for 30 years. I don't think he listens to the show much. I think he has to work during the day. We're friendly. He says, Art Laffer, you know Art Laffer, right? He was the economic advisor to Ronald Reagan. This is texting me exactly. It says, Art Laffer on Fox Business News said he's been working with Kehoe, and if Amendment 5 passes, It will be the greatest economic boom for Missouri ever. Now, who's Art Laffer? Art Laffer is tied to the Reagan administration. I like Art Laffer. I think most people think Art Laffer is an economic genius. Art Laffer is involved in ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council or Commission.
Art Laffer was the mastermind between the Kansas income tax debacle.
That's right. But they don't say that. They're not going to tell you that on Fox News. And then if you look through the people that are in favor of A5, right down in the middle of it, ALEC. And if you look at ALEC, you're going to see all of the major players. Rick Bratton is ALEC. Nick Schroer.
All the Freedom Caucus folks go.
All the Freedom Caucus are ALEC. And what ALEC is a private organization that brings in the last one that they did, or one of the last ones they did. You know who was involved in it? Was Rex Sinquefield's daughter.
Yeah.
So Rex Sinquefield's daughter goes to the ALEC meetings. They bring up legislation that they say worked in Maine, or this worked in Kansas, or this worked in Texas. And here's the legislation. We're going to bring it to you. Going to put a nice little bow on it. We want you to pass this legislation. And I wonder if the businesses that want them to pass the legislation have any vested interest, or if they're just looking out.
Yeah, I think when I was looking up, researching into ALEC, the businesses have an input, but they're a model legislation factory is what ALEC is. And that's how they spread these things all across the country. So when you tell people, when we're talking about Missouri, this is happening in your state too, ALEC is part of the reason why it's happening in all the different states.
Ain't that something? How that all works? I find the incestuous nature of politics to be fascinating, and fascinating because it's both sides of the aisle. It's not Democrat or Republican. That is why I brought up the Fox News and CNN host right off the bat. These are people that they play their role. He was a Democrat when he was younger. No, he was a Republican when he was younger. When they get into big time politics, they're just the Mitt Romneys of the world who went to Harvard. They're all in kind of the same game together, and they are constantly lying to us.
And I think I've heard you say this before, and it stuck with me because it's like the old school professional wrestling where, so-and-so's on this side this time. And I mean, it is truly theater, and that's what I begin to think, and pretty sure that the CNN Fox stuff was all set up from the very beginning.
Yes.
And we're all been played against one another. Yes. And that's what we're seeing at all levels now.
I don't even think that's theory. I think that's a fact. I think you're right on the button. I think that is exactly you got to remember, the establishment only wins when the people are fighting over what the establishment is saying. That's how the establishment ultimately wins. What they do is they create a right, they create a left, they create two entities. They use social media to make sure just about the same amount of people see each one. They create these narratives where we fight against one another. And then as we fight against one another, they can be $40 trillion in debt. They can mandate a mask on your face. They can leave the borders wide open. They can sell you on all kinds of different nonsensical things that they make money off of. And they can sell you even on war, and they'll have people cheerleading for war, as I did with the first Gulf War. I'm like, I can't believe that I was in favor of that war. The second one, you thought I would learn by that point, but I didn't learn by that point either. And these people that are watching Fox News, I'm positive, Mike, if Fox News started to tell you that Mexico needed to be invaded by America because of something they have going on there, you would see the Fox News audience going, we've got to go into Mexico, got to get into Mexico immediately, because that's the information that seeps
at the same time. When they get us all focused on that, though, then they do stuff like, I don't know how many people know right now, we just bailed out Japan's financial system. We bailed out the yen. It was about to collapse. I don't know all the details on it, but that seems like a pretty big deal to me.
Well,
nobody's talking about that. We're talking about,
Did you check out what happened with Spain? We'll talk about Spain a little bit later on this week. What's going on with Spain? We passed money. Yeah, we were funding the invasion of Spain. Right? We're funding it. And then we'll talk about how crazy it is, and we're funding it. I mean, we're the ones paying the money for it. American taxpayers are paying for the infiltration of Spain, my home country. I don't know if you know that. That's where my family comes from. It's from Spain. So bizarre. All right, let me get to a little bit of advertising, and then can we get these, Mike? I know that you're filling in for Isaiah. These all those clips can go away.
Okay.
If you can get them off of there, because we'll have Hugh Owen coming in, and then we'll kind of switch over. We're going to do multiple topics today. When we switch over, we're going to talk about creation versus evolution. I like to get into biblical things. I think we're in a spiritual war, and he is going to talk about how the theory was sold of evolution. Are you? I believe you think there's a creator, don't you, Mike?
Oh, absolutely.
I believe there's a creator. I think the argument of evolution is silly, and I think that people that believe in evolution think that people like you and I are silly because they believe science and they believe Dr. Fauci and they believe things they can't quite possibly explain. But all you got to do is give them it's almost like a trail. It's like you give them a trail of information. They follow that trail and they go, see there, it's evolution. You know, it's so obvious. And I don't think it's quite obvious at all. So let me get into a few advertisers and then we'll bring in Hugh Owen. Hugh Owen, he is with Colby Institute, Kolbe Institute, if people want to look them up as I go through the advertisers. Number one advertiser of the day. We don't have the visuals because Isaiah's not with us, so I'm going to have to do this on my own. But I want to make sure that everybody looks into peopleslobbymo.com, peopleslobbymo.com, actformo.org, either one, peopleslobbymo.com, actformo.org. These are the organizations that I think are having an effect now. If you look at Amendment 5 and Amendment 4, we are the ones that said, wait a minute, these things may look good, the frameworks may look good, but are we really recognizing what the end game here could be? And once people started to really digest the information, they said, well, wait a minute, framework for A5 with no plan? I don't know if I trust that. Taking power away from the citizens and leaving the power in the hands of the legislature because we are a republic, not a direct democracy. But those people won't fix the elections. Those people won't do anything that their constituents want. They continue to pass liberal legislation despite having a supermajority. At some point, you look at that and go, I just don't trust that entity, and I don't want to take my power away for them for a problem that they created in the first place, if that makes sense to everybody. peopleslobbymo.com. We are a marketing organization that puts pressure on the government. Marketing that puts pressure on the government. If you see how people are reacting right now, if you see some of the backlash that's happening from what I would call establishment politicians in the state of Missouri, you'll see very quickly that it's working. It's beginning to work. They're beginning to lose their minds over the things that we say about them and the things that we promote. They don't like it. Have you noticed that a little bit lately? They're coming out with guns a-blazing lately.
Well, and what we've noticed is the level of the questions from the general public has gotten so much better because they're informed now. They know what to ask. They know where to look, I guess, is the way to think about it.
I was talking to Dana Bowers. You know, she's doing live streaming out there in Franklin County over the data center situation. I talked to her for about a half hour, 45 minutes last night, and she gave credit to you and your website. She goes, I've been going through that act4mo.org website, and oh my God, I learned so much. And then now all of the things that she was wondering about, now it's starting to make sense to her. And she's doing incredible live streams. She said the last live stream she had 11,000 viewers.
Oh, wow.
On her live stream talking about data centers in a little small county, Franklin County.
That's
incredible.
Awesome.
And let me get to one more advertiser, get to a couple more, then we'll bring in Hugh. RocketCareers.com. These are my good friends, Mitch and Brian. Very simple, easy to understand. If you're out of work and you hate your job and you want to launch a new career, these guys have a network from coast to coast, and they'll help you change your life if you so desire. If you don't like your job or you're starting to panic because the bills are coming due and you've been out of work for a little bit, just give these guys a call and they'll take care of you, and they'll do it in a friendly, you'll become friends with them. Rocket, ROCKIT careers.com. It's 636-778-2419. 636-778-2419. And if you are an employer, this is for small to medium-sized businesses. This is where they specialize. They're not one of those big corporate job placement services. These guys concentrate on the little guy. So if you don't have a human resources department, if the human resources department is a little off and the candidates they put before you are like, man, why can't I get better people to work in my business? Just give rocketcareers.com a call. 636-778-2419. They'll find the right candidates for you. Out of work, hate your job, rocketcareers.com. Own a business, small to medium size, and can't find good candidates for your open positions, rocketcareers.com, ROCKIT careers.com, 636-778-2419. And then one more, let me get Rack Custom Coatings in here. This is my good friend, Rich McQuay. As I've said, I say it every day. If you have a garage and you got oil stains all over the floor, but you like to have your man cave out there, or you've got a beautiful home and the garage just doesn't kind of look right with your home, get this epoxy treatment. It's not very expensive. It changes the entire look of your home. Great curb appeal, adds value to your house. When people see it, the first thing they're going to notice is when you open that garage door and that flooring looks amazing. I'm telling you, it's one of the first things people notice. And again, for industrial spaces, schools, hangars, anywhere where there's large flooring area and you don't want to pay for tile and you don't want to pay for wood. It's just too expensive. Think about epoxy and what it can do for you. Great service, great guy, locally owned and operated since 2001. Again, his name is Rich McQuay. You can reach him at 636-398-5040, 636-398-5040. All right, my next guest, I've been looking forward to talking to this guy. He was supposed to be on yesterday, and then we ended up with the all of the Missouri conversation. My next guest, his name is Hugh Owen, comes to me from my friend Helen, and she said, you might want to have this guy on. It's kind of a theme for your show, which one of our themes is, this is a spiritual operation we got going on here. I think that's the underlining theme to everything is we have a spiritual battle going on. This guy is heavily involved with Catholic organizations. He's written for many publications. I can't read them all. Actually, let me see if I can read them all. Hugh Owen. He has written for books and articles for the Catholic Distance University, Human Life International, Seton Homeschool, the Apostolate for Family Consecration, Latin Mass Magazine, the Social Justice Review, the Fellowship of Catholic Scholars, Journals of Canada. He is everywhere, and he is going to be in St. Louis on August 6th. We'll get that to everybody here in just a minute. Let me bring in Hugh Owen, and let me figure out how I want this to look. Let me do it.
Push me back.
Yeah, let me figure this out. I'll get this done. Nope. There we go. We'll do it that way. All right. Hugh Owen, welcome to the show. We're without a producer. Mike's doing the best he can, but I've been looking forward to having you on, sir, because I'm interested in the conversation. I know you're coming to St. Louis in a few days. Right. We'll promote that here in just a bit, but your title is very interesting. It says Creation versus Evolution, and then the subtitle caught my attention. I was talking to Helen about it last night. The UFO Church Link. So tell me what the story that you want to get out to people and the way you're going to present it. Just give me a rough draft of what you're talking about.
Okay, so since about 400 years ago, there was a revolution that took place in the world of ideas, and there were some very intelligent men like René Descartes and Immanuel Kant and other so-called Enlightenment thinkers who rejected what all the greatest Christian fathers and thinkers had believed and taught since the time of the passion, death, and resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ, which was that God created everything in the beginning for us supernaturally, and that when he was finished creating our first parents, Saint Adam and Saint Eve, he stopped creating any new kind of creature because he created everything for us. We would say in view of the incarnation. And then the natural order, what we're living in now, the order of providence, as some of our great doctors of the church call it, only began when that whole work of creation was finished. You see, that's what every apostle, every father, every doctor of the church believed and taught and would have died for. And as long as everybody believed that, everyone understood that there's a boundary that has to be drawn between theology, which is the queen of the sciences, and natural science. Because everybody understood that God had revealed very clearly that this entire work of creation was supernatural, and the natural order, what we're living in now, didn't even begin until that whole work of creation was finished. And so what that meant is that the church gave to the world the most wonderful framework for doing scientific and medical research, because everybody knew we can't figure out how everything came to be by studying what's going on now. So we need to focus on understanding what God created. What are the natures of things and how are they related to each other? And that's how science, medicine, and technology developed within Christendom, within that framework. But when we get to the so-called Enlightenment, all of a sudden there's a revolution against this beautiful framework. And it's predicted by St. Peter in one of the most amazing prophetic passages in the entire Bible, 2 Peter chapter 3. He says, in the latter days, scoffers will come into the church saying things have always been the same from the very beginning of creation. And therefore, we can study what's going on now and extrapolate from that all the way back to the beginning. We don't need any revelation from God. We can figure it all out for ourselves. But St. Peter goes on to say that these scoffers will have to ignore the fact, not the pious belief, that it was the word of God that brought the heavens and the earth and the seas and all they contain into existence. Not a natural process like a supernova explosion. And he goes on to say that they will, I'm sorry, I get carried away, forgive me.
No worries, I'm gonna keep you going, but it never made any sense to me, the argument of evolution. You know, I don't know a ton about it because it was one of those things that, you know, what I always believe in, you know, the Lord created everything. I don't really delve into evolution. There's to me, it is a belief system of sorts. I want to see if you have science behind it, because that's one of the questions I have to ask. But when I looked at it and they say that I came from a monkey or these types of things, and this was the natural evolution, my mind always goes back to, well, how did everything start? Because the human mind can only understand a start to something. There has to be a beginning. From how does something come from absolutely nothing without something supernatural? And that's where the argument ends for me. If you say that there was evolution, well, who evolved from what? I mean, how does anything begin? How does a rock get here? How does air get here? How does human consciousness get here? There has to be something supernatural, and that seems so obvious to me. But you know, I'm sure people would argue that are very intelligent. Am I looking at it crazy? I'm perfectly novice point of view, but am I looking at it the way you would look at it, or am I looking at it like a fool?
No, what you're saying makes perfect sense. But what we would say is that just by using your common sense, you can figure out that there has to be a supernatural creator. And that's what you're saying. Right. And that's true. But what we are trying to help people to see and to remember is that we have a Heavenly Father that we can call Abba. And he not only has told us that he created everything, he's told us when, how, and over what period of time he did it. Because he's our daddy. He loves us. And he wants us to understand these things so that we can really appreciate the love that he showed for us by the very way that he created the world for us. And so the point that I was trying to make before, and I'm sorry I was so long-winded about it, is that in this so-called enlightenment, that prediction of St. Peter in 2 Peter chapter 3 was fulfilled, because you had, for example, René Descartes, who was educated by Jesuit priests, the most wonderful education available anywhere in the world he received. But instead of being grateful for that and remaining in the church to build up the church, he lived a very immoral life, especially against the sixth commandment. And he dabbled in Rosicrucianism, the occult. And then he had 3 mystical dreams where he himself said that a spirit of truth possessed him and put him on the path to develop a wonderful new way of thinking that would change the way everybody thought. And one of those wonderful new ideas that spirit of truth, alias some demon from hell, put into the mind of this genius was this one: that it's more reasonable to explain the origins of things in nature, like the solar system, plants, animals, even the human body, in terms of the same material processes that are going on now, instead of this strange idea that everything just popped into existence in the beginning. But you see, the Catholic Church put his books on the index of forbidden books because every theologian worth his salt knew that this was completely absurd. It would be like reading in St. John's Gospel about the first miracle that our Lord worked in public at the wedding at Cana. And it would be like reading that account and then saying, well, it seems to be saying that our Lord instantly changed ordinary water into the most wonderful wine that anybody had ever tasted. Oh, but I think it would be more reasonable to give a natural explanation. Maybe there were some microbes in the water and they interacted in such a way that it made that water look and smell and taste just like wine. Is that reasonable? That is completely absurd.
Right.
And yet, for any theologian worth his salt, Descartes' idea, oh, we can just throw Genesis out and we can explain how everything came to be through the same material processes that are going on now in nature, that was every bit as absurd. And yet today, Descartes' false philosophy reigns supreme, even in Christian academia.
Mike, what do you think?
Speaking of that first miracle, I just recently heard a world-renowned chemist talk about what it would take to change water to wine, and what a miracle that was. If you look at the actual molecules that would have to be switched and to produce.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's. He said it's. If people understood that, they would understand what an incredible miracle that was. He said people overlooked that miracle, but he understood it because he understands the chemistry involved in making that happen, and happen instantaneously. He said it had to be God.
And the thing is, God has a reason for everything that he does. And if you go back to the fathers, like St. Maximus the Confessor, they point out that there's a reason why there were 6 containers of water. Why 6? Why not 5? Why not 2? Why not 10? Because St. Maximus says our Lord wanted everybody to understand that the divine power by which in an instant he changed ordinary water into the most wonderful wine that anybody had ever tasted, that had the appearance of having gone through a very long natural process that never took place, was the same divine power by which in the 6 days of creation, he created the heavens and the earth and the seas and all they contain. And what people need to understand is that once the intellectual elite of the Christian world went over to the false philosophy of the Enlightenment, which you can call naturalism, uniformitarianism, and basically it's materialism, it was the biggest disaster for scientific and medical research. Because our fathers in the faith, because they took God at his word in Genesis, whenever they looked at anything in nature, they presumed stable form and function. Take William Harvey, the first scientist to accurately describe the working of the circulatory system in the human body. When he was asked, how did you figure this out? You know what he said? He said he asked himself, why would the system be designed the way that it is, with the veins and the arteries, with the blood going in different directions through the body? And because he presumed creation, because he presumed stable form and function, he was able to formulate a hypothesis, test it, and confirm how the circulatory system in the human body actually works. That is how science and medicine progress. But look what's happened now. Now that even Christian academia has gone over to this false Enlightenment philosophy and operates as if we can explain how everything came to be just by looking through our telescopes and our microscopes and studying what's going on now. We have catastrophe after catastrophe. We have, for example, a situation where when I was an undergraduate at Princeton University, my grandfather was a Baptist minister during the Welsh revival of Evan Roberts, if you know about that, one of the greatest revivals in the last 150 years. My dad was conceived during that great Welsh revival. But when he went to university in England, he was totally indoctrinated into evolution-based secular humanism. So I was brought up with no Bible, no church, no prayer, nothing.
Really?
But I was sent to the most elite schools so that I would get the very best education that you could get in the secular humanist world. Well, when I went to Princeton University as a freshman, I received the grace of conversion to Christianity. And when I received the gift of faith and I truly repented, I wanted to find out where our Lord wanted me to worship. And it so happens that at the center of the Princeton campus is a very beautiful Gothic chapel. As you know, Princeton started out, like all the greatest universities, as a seminary. And when I was there as an undergraduate in 1972, they still technically had a Presbyterian minister as the official chaplain of the university. But in that beautiful Gothic chapel, they had Presbyterian services, they had Lutheran services, they had Episcopalian services, and they had the Roman Catholic Holy Mass. So I went in there searching for where I could worship my God, and I observed all these different liturgical services. And one of the main reasons why I presented myself to the Jesuit priests, who were the chaplains at that time for Catholic students at Princeton, and said that I wanted to become a Catholic, is because I could see, in a way that I could not explain, that our Lord Jesus Christ was present in the Holy Eucharist in a way that he was not present in any other liturgical service. And but when I went to those Jesuit priests at Princeton University, they gave me a book so that I could learn the doctrines of the Catholic faith, which was completely based on the assumption that evolution was a scientific fact. And one of the reasons why those brilliant priests who had gotten this incredible education were so convinced that this molecules to man myth was a fact that only a fool would deny, is that at that time, the consensus view in biology in the entire world was that 98% of our DNA was junk. You probably heard that. Mm-hmm. That was absolutely the consensus view in biology throughout the entire world. And even most of Christian Catholic academia went over to it. Why? Because at that time, in 1972, the only part of our DNA that was understood was the 2% that codes for protein, that tells little molecular machines in our cells how to put amino acids together to make proteins, which form the building blocks of our bodies. And since the other 98% wasn't understood, of course, within the framework of evolutionary mythology, it made perfect sense that it was just leftover junk from the hundreds of millions of years of evolution, right? Because some of it was functional when we were fish, some of it was functional when we were amphibians, some of it was functional when we were reptiles, and on and on and on. And so instead of actually studying the so-called junk DNA to find out what it was doing, it was just so much more convenient to conclude that it was leftover junk from the hundreds of millions of years of evolution. And so Richard Dawkins and company went all over the world making millions of converts to atheism, saying, how can you be so stupid as to believe that there's an intelligent designer when 98% of our DNA is junk? That would be incredibly stupid. Well, because of that evolution-based catastrophic error, it took about 15 to 20 years before a minority within the scientific community could actually obtain funding for Project ENCODE to study the so-called non-coding DNA. And what did they find? Of course, they found that not only is the junk DNA not junk, it actually operates at a higher level of functioning than the DNA that codes for protein. And one of the things that it does is to switch on and off very sophisticated genetic programs that make it possible for plants and animals to adapt, sometimes very rapidly, to a changing environment. But you see, those Jesuit priests who baptized me, confirmed me, and gave me my first Holy Communion, in spite of the incredible education that they had received, because they bought into this totally bogus mythology of evolution, they actually believed that junk DNA was like the final proof that was needed to confirm that molecules to man evolution was a fact that only an idiot would deny.
Mr. Owen, do you think that it was done intentionally? Do you think there was a movement from, let's say, evil forces to move away from the idea of creation because they wanted to move away from God, wanted to move away from Christianity, so they come up with some theory? Or do you think this just happened naturally, or do you think there was a motive behind it?
Behind it is Satan and the demonic forces. But they, as we know, are very clever at manipulating fallen human beings and playing on our weaknesses, so that most of the people who are now promoting this molecules to man mythology are actually convinced that it's true. It's not that most of the people who are promoting it are Satanists. Now, I do believe that at the very highest level of the powers that be that are trying to create this godless new world order with the digital currency and total surveillance state throughout the entire world. Yes, I do believe that those people are in fact totally consecrated to Satan. But the probably 99% of their clueless followers, including people with PhDs and genius IQs, you know, they really think that this nonsense is true. Because I can tell you, from having grown up in a home where we were surrounded by Oxford and Cambridge graduates, Ivy League graduates, these people were highly intelligent, but they were completely unaware of the assumptions that had been transmitted to them. They didn't have a Socrates who was capable of actually getting them to reflect, to determine what was the actual foundation of these things that they believed. And when I met somebody like that, and one of my most vivid memories of my childhood was actually meeting a Polish intellectual who had been captured and tortured by the Gestapo during World War II and then suffered again under the communists in Poland. And my dad, who had a very high position in the UN at that point, introduced me to this man and gave me the opportunity to talk to him when I was about 14, 15 years old. And I asked him, Professor Matsuda, my father told me that you were tortured by the Gestapo and you went through all this. How did you survive that? You know what he said to me? He said, when I was arrested by the Gestapo with other men, there were men like Hercules who didn't last a single night. After one few hours of torture, they were totally broken. And there were other men who were tortured again and again and again, and they never broke. So I asked him, How do you explain that? And he looked up and he said, God. And I never forgot it. But can you imagine living 15 years and you meet one person who's able to bear witness to ultimate reality?
Only one.
That's what these people live. That's their life. And that's why we need to do everything in our power to reach out to them, because most of them are duped and deceived. It's only that tiny, tiny fraction who are actually deliberately, consciously consecrated to Satan.
When you get into conversations with people who see it from an evolutionary standpoint, what is your take on the arguments? Are you able to bend their opinion in the right direction? I always find that with people that are highly educated, I talk about this on my show on occasion. I don't think intelligence and education go hand in hand. And a lot of people, when they have a degree or a master's degree or a doctorate, they just by the nature of societal norms, they believe that they're smarter than people who may only have a high school education but decided to take a different track. They just by societal norms think that they're smarter than people. And I always find that if you are arguing with somebody or debating with somebody who has a big education, it's almost impossible to shake their mind because they come into the argument believing that they are superior in intelligence to the other person, which I don't know how you get around that, but I'm just wondering if you have these kind of problems when you argue with people that are very well educated and say, no, you got it wrong. It's all evolution. And here's why. How do those conversations play out over time?
Generally speaking, there are exceptions, but generally speaking, it's just as you say. The ability of the person to question their presuppositions is in inverse proportion to the amount of academic education they've received. And the single biggest truth we have found that opens the way to being able to understand and embrace all the truths that our Heavenly Father has revealed through His Word and through the church with regard to creation, redemption, and sanctification is what I said at the very beginning, the creation providence framework. The fact that everything was created supernaturally in a very short creation period, and we are living in the period of providence, the natural order, and you cannot extrapolate from the natural order to explain what happened in the supernatural order. And the more academic education a person has, the more difficult it is for them to grasp that concept, and it's even more difficult for them to embrace it. But I can talk to an illiterate woman who cleans toilets for a living, and I can explain that to her, and she can understand it in a heartbeat if she's a baptized Christian in the state of grace. So that's the biggest problem that we find. But we do now have scientific evidence that is so overwhelming that unless a person is totally prejudiced and has personal prejudices that prevent him or her from even looking at the evidence with an open mind, we can now convince anybody that evolution is bogus and that creation, supernatural creation, is the only rational explanation for what we see in nature. And here's the evidence. And what's interesting is this evidence has been produced super abundantly through Project ENCODE. So the study of what was called junk is what has now brought us to the point where anybody who's open-minded, who looks at the evidence, will no longer believe in molecules to man evolution, and they will embrace special creation. So what is the evidence? The evidence that Project ENCODE and other cutting-edge research in genetics has brought to light is that in every single living thing, even the quote-unquote simplest living thing, which which is far more complicated than any human mind can comprehend. Even the simplest living thing, every living thing, contains coded information. And we now know that the DNA sequences in every single living thing can be read in one direction and you get a functional message. You can take the same sequence and read it in the opposite direction. You get a different functional message, which is understood and carried out within the organism. Then you can take the same sequence and every third letter or every fifth letter will make a third functional message. And then you can take that same sequence and within the organism, it gets translated into another language and produces a fourth functional message. There is no human being that can come close to producing information at that level of density and complexity. And here's the kicker. If you make any change to information that is written at that level of density and complexity, it's always going to be harmful. We were all taught that the way a microbe turned into a microbiologist was that over the hundreds of millions of years, every so often there was a beneficial mutation which gave an organism an advantage, and then that got passed on to their offspring, and then that's how the microbe turned into the microbiologist. Well, we now know that that is a complete fantasy because mutations destroy the architecture of the genome. And if you examine, as our scientists have done, every single beneficial, in quotation marks, mutation that is in the textbooks, what you find is in every single case, something is actually being broken, which gives the organism a short-term advantage. But it does not add any new function or improve the overall fitness or survivability of that organism. So we now know from 21st century genetics that molecules demand evolution is not only completely false, it's the opposite of the truth.
You know, I have science.
Because reality is devolution. Reality is God created everything perfect in the beginning. St. Adam and St. Eve were perfect in their genome. And that's why their children could have married without any risk of harm to the offspring, because they had no genetic load whatsoever. But with the original sin, as St. Paul teaches in Romans 8, that's when the bondage to decay began. That's when the harmful mutations started to accumulate in the human genome. And that's when lifespans started to decline from 700, 800, 900 years down to what we have today.
Fascinating. I got to ask you, because you brought it up, and when you said we're putting in the surveillance system, we talk about that on the show all the time. One of the things I was going to ask you about was with the DNA. We had this conversation with a lot of people at the time. The vaccines were genetic therapies. They were a lot of people saying they were there to alter the DNA. And I'm curious if you think that was if it kind of plays into the theme that people are messing around with people's DNA so that there will be some adverse effect later on down the line. Do you have any commentary or any thought process on the mandatory vaccinations that were really genetic therapies in a spiritual sense? Because they're saying that 70% of all Americans took these genetic therapies, which always seemed a little bit. I could not understand how people were falling for it at the time, but a lot of people either took it to keep their jobs or to travel, or they were scared into taking it or coerced into taking it. Do you see anything sinister behind all of that? Because a lot of people think it did change people's DNA.
No, it's totally diabolical. Our main biologist, Pamela Acker, actually came very close to getting a PhD at Catholic University doing research in the field of vaccine development. But she came to realize that the paradigm that she had been taught from childhood and throughout her scientific career was totally false. And when she was in this PhD program at Catholic U and doing research in vaccine development, she discovered that they were using vaccines that were derived from tissues taken from aborted children. And she went to her supervisors and said, this is wrong. We shouldn't be doing this. And she discovered that this is a whole industry. And they were not about, even though it went completely against the teaching of the Catholic Church, the whole vaccine industry has been committed to this abomination of using tissues taken from murdered babies to conduct their vaccine development. So from our point of view, and if you look up Pamela Acker, you can go to LifeSite News, for example, and put in the name Pamela Acker. And I would encourage you to have her on your show, because in my judgment, she is one of the greatest experts on the horror of the whole vaccine industry, but specifically the COVID so-called vaccine. And she's coming out with a book. God willing, we'll be publishing it through the Kolbe Center before Christmas, which will be the most authoritative book by a Catholic scientist on the subject of vaccination, and specifically the COVID so-called vaccination that has ever been written. And what she shows is that most vaccines are developed using tissues taken from aborted babies, and that this is contributing to all kinds of horrific health problems, including autism, for example. And what she is able to point out, which unfortunately many very intelligent and righteous researchers are not able to point out, is that it's the evolutionary lie that justifies the whole vaccine industry, because it was developed by people who rejected the truth that God created us perfect in the beginning, and that the objective of sound medicine should be to understand the divine design of the human body and figure out how to use the body's immune system and marvelous divine design to be able to handle threats in a way that is harmonious with that design. Within an evolutionary framework, there is no original human nature. There is no perfect design. We are an accident. And if I'm a theistic evolutionist, I may say, well, God somehow superintended this process. But the reality is that that process is one that involved hundreds of millions of years of death, deformity, and disease. So vaccination then becomes a logical approach to dealing with disease, because we don't have a divine design. Our Heavenly Father didn't equip us with the ability to respond to various threats to our health using the elements that He provided to us through the original creation. And so we come up with these foreign ways of trying to deal with these threats. But in every case, the evolutionary mentality leads us to focus on one particular symptom or one particular problem, being totally oblivious to the effect that it has, that the treatment will have on the whole organism.
Exactly. Again, to me, that's common sense. I said that at the time. I said, I'm not a doctor, but if you're messing with people's genetics, ultimately, even if it fixes something, it's going to cause problems somewhere else. And I'm just thinking, because we are designed perfectly. If we're designed by God, why am I tinkering with God's creation
Exactly.
That's the way I looked at it from the very get-go. And I had so many people in my family fight with me. I lost friends over it. I was talking about it in real time. The beginning of the show, we were showing how the media sold COVID, and we're driving people to go out and get their vaccines and to stay isolated and to be at home and wear their mask and their football helmets and their flippers and their bubble wrap and all that kind of thing.
Right.
And we were talking about it in real time. I said, this doesn't make any sense. And you could prove that it didn't make any sense in real time. But nobody, as I used to say, the elevator's not going to the top floor. People are not recognizing how easy this is to recognize as a media scam. Forget the evolution and creation just for a second. Just the media lies were so obvious to see. But nobody, it didn't seem like many people, the majority of people just fell into the fear and went out and did it. And I wonder if these people have had, their 2 boosters and so forth and so on. Do you think it alters their genetic design so much that in the future we have shorter life frames as a society because you've tinkered with something and you can't make it whole again?
I don't know, and I don't want to claim knowledge that I don't have. But I really do encourage you to go on our website and put Pamela Acker in the search engine, because anything that she puts out there in writing or in video, you can be sure she has done her homework. And I don't know anybody who is a more reliable source of information on this topic than she is. And she has suffered.
Oh, yeah.
She's paid a very high price. And I want to emphasize something. We've gone all over the world to try to proclaim the truth of what God revealed to us about how he created the world as the foundation of our faith, but also as the only firm foundation for a culture of life. And what we found is that when the COVID, we call it the Corona mania, when the Corona mania erupted, we had friends in the pro-life community all over the world, and they were totally divided over the vaccine mandates. We had friends in what we call the traditional mass movement within the Catholic Church who are trying to defend the traditional ways of worshiping God that give him the greatest possible glory. They were totally divided. But within our community, the active members of the Kolbe Center, we did not have one single person in our entire global family who was duped by the COVID scam. Not one.
That's amazing. That's amazing because, I just have a background in it, and I know we're talking about other things, but I have a background in it because I started talking about it very early, and I was talking about it earlier on the show. I would tell people what I thought was happening and say, you just look at it this way, watch this, watch that, and here's the research. I've been reading some of these journals about the research that's been done. I said, they're just lying to you on television. They're not telling you the truth. They're telling you the journal says something. I said, go read it. You don't have to read all 80 or 100 pages of the journal, but they have a summary at the very end. What the doctors on television are telling you is not in alignment with the actual research itself. So right now, the media has got a lie going on, and people just looked at me like I had 3 heads. They could not digest that the television set wasn't telling them the truth. I still find it one of the most fascinating things I've ever been through in my adult life was watching that COVID con job roll out and watching how people stood in line for things that didn't make any sense. It still fascinates me. I got just a couple other questions for you, and you tell me if I'm off base here because I was studying for our conversation, and I don't know if this applied to you or if I heard it somewhere else. I was looking up, evolution and creation and just looking at what different thought processes people had. And one of them was about dinosaurs and the idea that dinosaurs aren't, because it's so crazy. When I was younger, a friend of mine named Pamela said, Rob, you need to start reading the Bible. And I said, well, she goes, are you a Christian? I said, I'm a Christian. She goes, but you don't read the Bible? I said, I never really read the Bible. She goes, you have to read the Bible. And one of my questions back to her was, the Bible doesn't mention dinosaurs. If the Bible is accurate, why doesn't it mention dinosaurs? And then I'm watching some video the other day. I don't know if it's associated with you, sir. So if I'm off, you might just want to comment on it. And it said there is no real there is no real evidence that dinosaurs exist. Some of these giant bones that people see and they attribute them to dinosaurs might be the giants from the Bible. because they don't have all of the bones to create a dinosaur. They kind of put it together in like a puzzle piece. They have some bones and then they put the other piece together. You know anything about that, or am I way off target on this conversation? I apologize. It's just something that caught my attention.
It's fine. We know a lot about it because, and I can assure you, dinosaurs did exist, and some of them may still exist in some very remote environments. And there are dinosaurs that are mentioned in the Bible.
There are? Okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can tell you about it. But the word dinosaur in English was not coined until Sir Richard Owen, no relative as far as I know, coined that word around 1832. Prior to that, when English-speaking people wanted to talk about dinosaurs, they called them dragons. And if you go on our website and you put dinosaur in the search engine, you'll find all kinds of fascinating information. We had a homeschooled young man who wrote a marvelous research-based essay on evidence for human and dinosaur, historical evidence for human and dinosaur coexistence. And this young man did a marvelous job of showing how ancient civilizations all over the world had very realistic depictions, cave paintings, sculptures, all kinds of artistic representations of different kinds of dinosaurs. So accurate that there's no way that you could reasonably conclude that these people did not actually interact with these dinosaurs. And what we try to get people to see once we get beyond the creation providence framework is the other part of the puzzle that St. Peter talks about in 2 Peter 3, which is the flood. Because you've got creation, the fall, and the flood. And if you don't have that framework, you're not going to be able to make sense of what you see in the fossil record, because the fossil record is not the record of one kind of living thing turning into another. It's a record of all the different kinds of living things being buried in the sediment flows of a worldwide flood. That's what the fossil record essentially is. And we have collected dinosaur bones from Texas to Alaska, some of which we have excavated ourselves.
Wow.
And we can point out to people something that they never will hear on PBS or on any, science documentary in the mainstream, that it is the norm when you find a dinosaur graveyard that you will find, for example, in Montana, where we excavated a Triceratops, you will find, and the ranchers will tell you this if you go up there and talk to them, because a lot of them have become amateur paleontologists because they have these dinosaur graveyards on their property. You'll find the remains of a land-dwelling dinosaur jumbled together with the remains of creatures like dolphins and octopi that lived in the ocean, and the ocean is 1,000 miles away. How could that happen?
It can't.
In Noah's flood.
Yeah.
95% of fossils are marine organisms. 95%. They never tell you that in a standard course in geology or biology, but it's a fact. So Noah had to take some of every kind of land-dwelling creature on the ark. But the average size of a mature dinosaur is about the size of a sheep or a cow. The huge Brachiosaurus, T-Rex type dinosaurs, they were the exception. And of course, he would have taken juveniles. He wouldn't have taken a full-grown Titanosaurus on the ark. But most of the dinosaurs were buried in the sediment flows of Noah's flood. And the reason you find so many dinosaur graveyards up there in Montana is because that was the high ground.
They were moving on high ground.
Yeah, they went to the high, they went as far as they could go, and then there was nowhere to go any longer. And that's when they got buried. And I am so proud of the scientists on our advisory council who, even before we founded the Kobe Center almost 26 years ago, were taking the initiative to do original scientific research involving dinosaurs. And what they did was they started this project of collecting dinosaur bones from Texas to Alaska and sending them to world-class laboratories that have a machine called an accelerated mass spectrometer that can count the number of carbon-12 and carbon-14 atoms in the sample so that we could carbon-14 date the dinosaur bones. Now, anybody out there that doesn't know about carbon-14 dating, it's really very simple. In the atmosphere, when supernovae explode, cosmic rays come into the atmosphere. They collide with nitrogen-14 atoms. They turn them into carbon-14 atoms. The plants breathe in carbon dioxide. Most of the carbon is carbon-12, which is the stable form of carbon. But for every trillion atoms of carbon-12, there's one atom of carbon-14. So the plants breathe in the carbon dioxide. The animals and humans eat the plants. So plants, animals, and humans, they all contain carbon, mostly carbon-12, but also some carbon-14. When the plant, animal, or human dies, the carbon-14 immediately starts to turn back into nitrogen-14 very rapidly. So rapidly that the half-life of carbon-14 is only 5,730 years, which means that after 50 to 100,000 years, there will not be one single atom of carbon-14 left in the remains of that plant, animal, or human. So, if evolution were true and dinosaurs became extinct 65 million years ago, how many atoms of carbon-14 should they have found in our dinosaur bones? Zero. But every single one of our dinosaur bones was found to contain a substantial amount of carbon-14, and that's from 5 different world-class laboratories. Now, the average age that we got from carbon-14 dating our dinosaur bones was 20 to 30,000 years. And so the first reaction of people is, well, that still doesn't agree with the Bible, because the Bible would indicate that the world is much less than 10,000 years old. But it does, because you have to remember something very important. The Earth has a magnetic field, and we've been measuring the strength of the Earth's magnetic field very carefully for almost 200 years, and it is decaying exponentially. So if you make a very reasonable extrapolation, I'm not talking about these evolutionary crazy extrapolations, I'm talking about just a very reasonable extrapolation from empirical observations over a period of 200 years, you can be certain that the Earth could not be more than 10,000 years old. Because if the Earth's magnetic field were too strong, it would be impossible for life to exist on the Earth. But what it also means is when those dinosaurs were buried in the sediment flows of Noah's flood 4,500 years ago, the Earth's magnetic field was much stronger and production of carbon-14 in the atmosphere was much less. And that's why the 20 to 30,000 years that we get for dinosaur bones from dinosaurs who were buried in the sediment flows of Noah's flood definitely needs to be brought down to the 4,000 to 5,000 range, which the biblical chronology tells us was the time of the flood. And I just want to finish by saying there are academics like Paul Gem at Loma Linda University who have documented that there are literally dozens of peer-reviewed journal articles in scientific journals reporting the finding of substantial amounts of carbon-14 in everything in the geological column. They've taken coal that's supposed to be 300 million years old or 100 million years old or 30 million years old. They send it for carbon-14 dating. It all contains substantial amounts of carbon-14, and the 300 million year old coal has virtually the same amount as the 30 million year old coal. Why? Because all that material was deposited simultaneously in Noah's flood. So carbon-14 dating is proving that everything in the so-called geological column was actually laid down more or less simultaneously in the sediment flows of Noah's flood approximately 4,500 years ago, just as the Bible says.
Amazing. So it's like science, the way we look at science now is confirming the Bible.
Absolutely.
It's just the understanding of it, right? It's the understanding of it. And by the way, Mike, there will be a quiz for you tomorrow. I have a lot of questions. You just told us. One last thing, because it fascinates me. I'm a very simple man. When I hear the giants, right? The giants that are described, and I hear all of these stories about these bones of giants that have been excavated. Is that the right word? Excavated throughout the years?
Sure.
And are on display. When we look at that from a DNA sequence, is that related to man? Is that a completely different DNA sequence? Is that information available to us?
Well, we have to remember that the flood was a divine judgment because mankind had become so corrupt and had been given so much time to repent and turn back to God without any repentance that our Heavenly Father meant what he said. He destroyed that world. And that's why St. Peter says, the world that then was perished in the flood. That's why we find very few remains of humans from that cataclysm. But the giants were undoubtedly a reality. And if you look at Native American traditions, for example, there's no doubt that humans of what we would consider to be enormous stature did walk the earth, even in the post-flood world. But what we believe, and there's certain things, Rob, that we'll only find out on Judgment Day.
Right.
And one of the reasons for Judgment Day, I believe, is so that we can finally find out what really happened. Because there's so many things that we have been told, even within Christian circles, that unfortunately are not true. Because the people who won the battle of whatever day it was, they got to write the history books and give us, in many cases, a totally false account of what happened that corresponds to what they want us to believe about the past. But here's the thing. We are convinced that if you look at the biblical text, the way that it was understood in the tradition of the church by the fathers of the church, it's clear that there's some kind of link between the gigantism and satanic involvement. And we believe that the biblical text strongly indicates that people had become so given over to evil that the demons were actually able to influence the development of humans even from conception. We're starting to see this now with the spread of Satanism, because there are people who are consecrating children to Satan in the womb. And it is definitely having an effect not only on their mind, but also on their body. And I'll give you a concrete example. Within the Catholic Church, we have priests who are specifically trained to do exorcism and deliverance. And this goes back, if you read about the early church, this was the common practice in the early church, that certain people were instructed and specifically set apart for this ministry of exorcism. And some of the priests that we work very closely with in the Kolbe Center are actually trained exorcists. And there was a case that was reported by a priest who's active in this area about a young man who was being bullied in his public school. And so somehow or other, I don't know if it was through Harry Potter or some other source, but he invoked Satan or a demon. I don't know the exact nature of what he did, but he invoked a spiritual power to help him to defend himself against these bullies. And he became possessed by a demon. But after he became possessed, his body grew and he became much bigger, and he was actually able to intimidate these bullies because of the way that his body grew when he was in this state of possession.
Wow.
When he was exorcised, his body returned to its normal size. That is a fact. That is something that happened in recent years, and it was reported by a priest who is a reliable source of information. So I think that there are two things that are at work when we look at remains of very large humans from the past. One is we are devolving, so people were stronger, healthier, lived longer in the past than we do today. That goes against sort of the myth of progress, but we have to face the fact that the reason we may be living longer than our great-grandparents is not because we're more fit. It's because we have drugs and surgery and technology that preserves our life, but it doesn't mean that we're physically, genetically superior to our great-grandparents at all.
Exactly.
So there's that component, but then there's also this other component that when people interact with demons and allow themselves to be taken over by them, it doesn't just have spiritual and mental effects, it also has physical effects.
Incredible. Did you know that, Mike?
I did not. That was amazing.
That's the first I've heard of that story as well. Hugh, really enjoyed the conversation. We need intellect on the show every now and again. And when Isaiah is not here, and if Mike was here, there'd be none. So when you
I don't believe that at all.
That was a very enlightening conversation. Let me pull this up for everybody because I know you're speaking here on the 6th. I'm going to read it to you. It's on the screen. Creation versus evolution. And I got to get one more question to you because you said the UFO church link, and I want to delve into that before we leave. But I want to remind everybody that Hugh Owen is in St. Louis, hosted by Credo of the Catholic. Is it laity? L-A-I-
Yes, laity, right? Lay people. Yeah.
And this is on potluck dinner from 6 to 7. Program from 7 to 8. Question and answer starts at 8 p.m. The address is 12556 Merrick Drive, St. Louis, Missouri. And I'll put this out on my social media, and I'll take care of you. Robin Wood West Community Center. Robin Wood West Community Center. It is this Thursday, August the 6th. Again, potluck dinner from 6 to 7. Program is from 7 to 8, and question and answers are from start at 8 p.m. Advanced tickets are on sale for $10 at credostlouis.org. That is spelled CREDO, stlouis.org, credostlouis.org. And because we don't have Isaiah to put all these on the board, we'll do it again for you tomorrow. But if you want to call for information, the number is 314-322-0337. Again, with the number 314-322-0337. I'm going to leave us just like this so people can look it on their screen if they want to take notes. And I suggest they take a part in this. I always find these conversations incredibly fascinating because, you said earlier, some of it is common sense. And I think when you think through the world through a common sense lens, you always end up back to God being the creator, and you can't get away from it, in my opinion. And I don't know how people try to distract from it and give you these evolutionary theories, because at the end of the day, the human mind, as far as I understand it, cannot create something from nothing.
No.
You just can't create something from nothing. So right then and there, if you don't take it any further than that from a common sense point of view, there has to be a creator, and our creator is the Lord. Okay. So very quickly, what does this mean? It says the UFO church link, creation versus evolution. And then the subtitle is the UFO church link. What does that mean?
Okay. So at the present time, a huge number of Christian, that is Catholic and non-Catholic Christian intellectuals and theologians are embracing the idea that since evolution is true and human life up to and including the human body occurred on the earth, well, then of course it had to have occurred in other parts of the universe. And therefore, when people talk about encounters with aliens who seem to be operating spacecraft that are very real and operate in ways that seem to surpass the capabilities of our technology, well, then this should be accepted as something that's real. And if there are reports of UFO sightings or even encounters with beings who come from another part of the universe where life evolved, then we should take that seriously. And if these reports are being covered up, it means that the government is covering it up for some reason. And this is extremely dangerous because in our judgment, the whole idea that the government is covering this up is a complete lie. Because the real purpose of the cover-up is then to uncover so that people will think, oh, this is true. These aliens are real. And they'll think that now whoever's in power is unveiling the truth, when all they're doing is actually unveiling a lie. But they've done it very cleverly by first making us think that they covered up the truth, whereas the cover-up was just to make us even more completely duped and deceived by the lie when it was unveiled. Now, how do we know that this whole alien phenomenon is diabolical? It's really very simple. Number one, we now know from genetics that evolution is impossible. Evolution is impossible on Earth. It's also impossible anywhere because there is no material process that produces new information. And life requires matter, energy, and information. So if there's no material process that can produce new information, God is not only the only one who can make something from nothing, he's also the only one who can make life and make a new kind of life. Now, so we've established that evolution is impossible anywhere. So if something is happening that is being presented to us as a visitation by rational corporeal beings from another part of the universe, there's only one possibility. They are demons. Because demons throughout the history of the church have proven themselves perfectly capable of taking any kind of form that God permits them to take. And if you go to our website and you put UFO encounter, put those terms into the search engine, you'll find testimony of people who've devoted decades to researching UFOs and so-called encounters, who have proven beyond a reasonable doubt that all of these phenomena, when they're not, an optical illusion or the result of a mental illness or something like that, they are diabolical. And there's one particular man, his surname is Jordan, and Catholic Ministries International has done a lot of work with him. And he used to be a New Age proponent who believed that these encounters with rational corporeal creatures, from other parts of the universe were genuine encounters with such beings. When he became a Christian, he was given the grace to realize that all of these encounters were diabolical. And he's collected sworn testimonies from hundreds of people within the encounter movement who, when they became Christian, were completely freed from any kind of involvement with these so-called aliens. And he has many testimonies. For example, one I remember where a man was lying in bed next to his wife, and all of a sudden it seemed like the roof above, or the ceiling of the bedroom opened up, and he saw a spaceship, and he saw light come down from the spaceship towards him, and he felt himself being drawn up. And this is typical of what these encounter experiences are like. And he called out, "Jesus, save me." And in that split second, the whole thing disappeared. So the connection is evolution predisposes people to believe that life has evolved on Earth and in many other places. It sets them up then to be further deceived by thinking that rational corporeal creatures from other parts of the universe can visit the Earth and enlighten us, because you have to remember that a constant theme of the aliens is that we have come to save you. Jesus Christ, Buddha, Muhammad, they were wise teachers, but we have come to usher in the new age of enlightenment and bring every good thing from the past to fulfillment. And people are being set up to believe in that lie by the whole secular humanist way of educating people.
Interesting how you tie that together. We talk about in the show. We agree with you, but we think that the whole UFO thing is a farce. We think that people are falling for it. I remember when Tucker Carlson was covering on Fox News, I'm like, what's going on around here? With this alien beings coming in. I agree with you. If there's anything going on, it's in the spiritual world. It's not, we're not being visited from another planet. Hugh Owen, that was a lot of fun. If people want to get to your website, it's colbycenter.org. Colby.
Yes, sir.
And it's spelled Kolbe, colbycenter.org. Check out his information there. And again, you'll be in town on August the 6th at Robinwood West Community Center. Again, show starts at potluck dinner at 6, question and answer at 8, and the program from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Thanks for taking the time with us. That was very interesting. I appreciate it.
Thank you. God bless you.
God bless you, sir.
God bless you too.
Wow. Very interesting. I got to tell you. What did, let me see if I can, yeah, there we go. What'd you think?
Wow,
see, I'm fascinated by those kind of conversations.
There were a lot of light bulbs going off for me. I mean,
same with me.
The whole idea that, I'm surprised this never dawned on me before about our DNA being perfect at the beginning and it's been deteriorating all along. That just shows that, looking back through God's lens, it's just it changes your whole perspective on everything, and it makes total sense with explaining the lifespans dropping. I mean, that was probably the biggest light bulb for me in the whole.
I think that kind of stuff is fascinating. I got a buddy of mine. He goes, "I want what he's having," because when you hear people talk about the spiritual world and you don't believe in it, it sounds insane. It sounds completely crazy. But people that have had these experiences, that you can talk to them, and they're very intelligent people. If you've talked to somebody who've had these experiences, then all of a sudden it becomes real to you because you have somebody that you trust before you telling you something that you instinctively would say, well, that can't possibly happen because it's never happened to you. Does that make sense, Mike?
Yeah,
that's the way I see some of these things. And I used to be like my buddy Bill. I'm like, come on, it seems a little bit far out because you haven't experienced it in your life. But I had some crazy things happen to me in my life that I won't get into that have made me think. I just give you an example. I talk about this, and I'll just for people who think these kind of things are crazy. My closest friend in the world committed suicide in the late 90s. This was like a brother to me. This is a guy that I hung out with. We were inseparable. He supposedly committed suicide in Chicago in the late 90s. When he committed suicide, I started doing all of these things where I'm talking to God, and I'm looking for signs because there was a question as to whether he committed suicide or that he was murdered in my mind. And I knew the people involved. One of the people that was there when he died is somebody that I was very skeptical of. His father was a pilot, his stepfather was a pilot, so we flew into Chicago, met with the police officials, and I'm hearing these stories, and it's just I knew the players, so for me it was much more personal than even his family. I knew who the friend was where he committed suicide in his house. I knew this guy. I knew his history. I knew his behavior, and he was always a little bit of a loose cannon and somebody that I was always nervous to be around. You understand what I'm saying? So when my friend died in his home while he was supposedly taking a shower, for me, I went, wait a minute here. I'm not so sure this is suicide. This seems, it seems like it could be more to the story. So I remember flying home, and we're flying home, and you know how you start to talk to yourself when you're kind of in these weird moments where people die and you're looking for God's, signals and this kind of thing. And I remember looking at the clouds, and the clouds were all kind of scattered. And I said, Lord, if my friend committed suicide, let me see a yes, like a Y is what I was looking for. A Y, not a yes, but a Y. I said, let me see a Y in the clouds, or an N, or something that looks like a Y or an N. No means leave it alone. Y means, or no means to investigate further. Yes means he committed suicide. So I don't see anything. I get home. They're preparing for his funeral back in St. Louis, and I'm talking to a mutual friend, and she says, and this is within 24 hours of this conversation that I'm having in my head, this irrational conversation I'm having with God. At least I thought so. And she goes, she starts to read her number off to me. She says, well, call me, because she was going to sing at the funeral. She says, well, call me so we can make arrangements. I'd like to see the space and everything else. And she goes, and she reads off her number, and she said, and the last three numbers were 1358. She goes, if you look down at your phone, it looks like a Y. I thought, that's kind of odd. How many, it's just within the last 18 hours, I'm looking for somebody to use a Y or an N to give me comfort as to what really went down here, because I didn't want to leave my friend. If he was murdered, I don't want to walk away from it and not pay any more attention to it. So there was kind of this internal conflict to get to the bottom of it, to which the only way I could get to it was through God. And I asked that, and that happened. There was another, I've told this story on the air many times. I was driving down, this is within a day or two of the suicide. I'm driving down to downtown St. Louis, and I'm working at a downtown May company downtown, having a meeting down there. I drive down. It's there's no parking at the parking garage, so there's nowhere to park. And I look to my as I'm driving, I look to my left, and there's a parking lot, might still be there, and it said 706 Park. And my body went completely cold. It was this middle of, it was, I can't even tell you when it was, but I just remember my whole body got cold, and it just freaked me out a little bit. I'm like, what in the world? Just kind of one of those deals. And in my mind, I thought that 706 Park had meaning, or 705 Park. I'd keep saying 706, 705, 706 is different number. 705 Park is what it said. And I believe that it had meaning. So I called his sister. I called his mother. I started calling people. I said, does July 5th have any meaning and my buddy's name was Kevin. I said, in Kevin's life, I said, is there anything that, is his son's birthday, July 5th, family members, mom, anybody, does July 5th have any significance? So I got his whole family going through this because, we're all, kind of in panic over his passing, and I can't get to the date. So 705 July 5th in his family has no relevance whatsoever. Well, maybe a year later or so, I'm moving. So I was living in Chesterfield at the time. I was getting ready to move out of Chesterfield, and I lived like a bachelor. Everything that I from around the house got thrown into a drawer. I'm piecing through that drawer to throw things away or keep things that I want. You know how it is, Mike. You've been there, right?
Yeah.
So you everything in a drawer, everything that all your change and the little notes, receipts. There's just a whole junk drawer of stuff in there. And I start combing through the drawer, and I'm throwing stuff away and keeping things that I want. And I get down to the very bottom of this drawer. And I got to remember, this is probably almost a foot tall of just garbage inside of a nightstand. And I pull it out, and I'm going through it, and I get to the very end of it, and I look down, and there's a Cubs-Cardinals baseball ticket. The Cubs-Cardinals baseball ticket said July 5th, I think it was 1999 or 1998. That was the last day that I had seen my friend. He was living in Chicago at the time. I had flown into Chicago to watch the Cardinals and the Cubs and spend time with him. July 5th was the last day that I saw him alive. And it dawned on me, I'm like, wow, those experiences in my life say there's something bigger going on, because why would July 5th give me any kind of, the vibe that I got? I mean, just my whole body went cold. It was so weird. And it made such an impression on me that I started calling people. I'm just late for a meeting. I'm calling everybody going, July 5th, it has to mean something. July 5th. I just had this like premonition that July 5th means something. And then a year later, it all comes.
That's an amazing story.
Right?
That's what it is. But, as you come to Christ, though, when you're a young Christian or you don't believe, and you hear Christians say all the time, I see God working in my life all the time. It doesn't make any sense until you actually become a Christian and you start to see it happening in your life. And it's just amazing to me. It happens all the time. I mean,
absolutely.
They're small things, but there's no other explanation for them. And it's just, it's amazing.
It's 100% true. And what's interesting is I'm stubborn. As many people would tell you, I think I'm smarter than I am sometimes. And when I would push back against Christian ideology and just kind of poke holes in things that I thought I was poking holes in because I'm so clever and so smart. When I stopped doing that, and I had people lay their hands on me, and I said, I'm going to start reading the Bible. I'm going to turn my life over to Jesus. The amount of connecting of people, things in my mind, my whole concept of what we're here for changed. And it's changed. It continues to evolve. And every day I write on this piece of paper, you can see it. And it's kind of just my notes, but every day you'll see it right here. I write Jesus, please, every single day. Can you see it?
Yep.
Jesus, please. I write it every day because I take a lot of responsibility in not doing things wrong. I don't want to mislead people. I don't want my ego to get in the way of things. So every day I go on the show, I say a prayer right before I go on, that whatever I talk about, I'm giving you the best information as I understand it. I'm not trying to trick or mislead people, or, because you want to tell stories sometimes, and sometimes you'll exaggerate and all of a sudden somebody believes something that isn't based in reality. And I don't want to do that. I don't want my ego to get ahead of, my connection to the Lord. So I say that every single day, and it's amazing what happens. And I think when people make that leap, and I suggest everybody make this leap, when you begin to have faith in the Lord and you read the Bible and you start to understand what it's all about, because the Bible says this is what it's all about. Charlene Gibson is she's somebody, and her husband, she's in the chat. Her and her husband Roger, they'll tell you they were trying to convince me to read the Bible 25 years ago, and she's hearing me talking about it now. I think there was 2 people that stayed with me the whole time. Pam, the one that I'm talking about, Pam Barrett, was her brother that committed suicide, and Charlene and Roger stayed with me, and then my father and so forth. And they kept saying, stick with it, stick with it. You'll get here. You're a good person. You got to get to this point. And once I did, I started to recognize that you don't need to have the anxiety, the stress, the worry. You don't need it. So long as you stay centered, God does create the path for you. He gives you the energy. He gives you the knowledge. He puts the right people in your place, and everything that you think that you're trying to control, let it go.
Yeah.
Let it go. And it's amazing how God begins to shape your life. And when you feel that and you understand that, you can't really explain it to people who have not experienced it. But once they do, and the pieces start to fall into place, then you can have conversations with other Christians. They know exactly what you're talking about. But people that aren't there, they think that you're absolutely insane. They think that you're praying to this magical person in the sky, and that you're so down on your luck that you're just desperate for something. And I just want to tell everybody, I've never been desperate or down on my luck, ever. That's not how my life works. I'm a person that is completely optimistic. I believe that I can move mountains if I want to move them. I've always had this level of confidence within me, but I wasn't happy. I wasn't fully happy. I was content with life, I wasn't down, I wasn't depressed, but I didn't have that connection to something bigger that lets you know that everything's going to be okay. You don't need to panic every day. Everything's going to work itself out. Enjoy your life. Enjoy your time with your family. Enjoy these moments. It's just something that I just wish everybody could feel.
I do too, and I'll tell you, I didn't really turn my will over until very late in life.
Same with
and
me.
When I did, that's when I realized now that God was shaping me even when I was fighting against what He wanted for me. And I get to this point now where I'm doing what I'm doing now, something I would have never dreamed I would be involved with at all. And I see how all the different things He took me through, the doors that got slammed shut, the skills that I learned there, all of that's being used now. And it really truly is amazing to me to see that even when I wasn't being a faithful Christian and trying to submit my will to His, trying to make my will the driver of my life, God was still working for these ends now that I can clearly see now. But
right. It's like the footprints in the sand poem.
Yep.
My mom had that in our bathroom when I was a kid. It's the same thing. God, in the most difficult times in my life, I only see my footprints. I don't see yours. He goes, no, those are my footprints. That's when I was carrying you. And that just becomes reality for people that really, that are believers. You gotta believe in it and work it. And God seems to have all of the right answers at the right time, on His time, as my wife likes to remind me. It's on His time, not my time. All right, let me get some advertising in, and then we'll bring in Rick Babitz. Rick, cutting into his time. He doesn't like that. He gets very upset with me when I cut into his time. He's like, what are you doing, Rob? Come on now, let's go. AdvancedWellnessMed.com. She is the one. Helen Gelhart said, Rob, she has got me paying attention to what's going on with the Catholic Church and the differences in ideologies. And it's been, I learn a lot. She is the one that recommended Hugh. She's got a big event coming in with Bishop Strickland on September 12th that I'll be emceeing. AdvancedWellnessMed.com. And Dr. Helen Gelhart, Dr. Helen Gelhart.
I love Helen.
I love Helen. I love her. I just love everything about Dr. Helen Gelhart and Paul. They've been so wonderful to me. AdvancedWellnessMed.com. Just a very quick rundown of what she is, what her practice is all about. The reason I like her so much is because she got out of the hospital administrations. I understand how that system works. There's a lot of money to be made when you tie yourself to a hospital administration, the insurance companies, and there's a lot of ways to make money. She said, Rob, I just couldn't care for my patients the way I wanted to. Feel, think, look better, live longer is her credo. She assists with the divine healer, and she works on anything I think she specializes in anything that will kill you, Alzheimer's and dementia. Symptom reversal for Alzheimer's and dementia. I won't get into it. I talk about it every day, but if you have somebody in the family or a friend, how this all plays out if you don't get help right away. So if the mind's starting to go south, you see it in somebody you love, make this phone call. Just make the phone call so that you can keep your mind in order. 314-576-0094. She has the earliest cancer detection blood test available, and they do pre-screenings for heart attacks and stroke. So anything that is damaging or that will kill you, she specializes in. AdvancedWellnessMed.com. Dr. Helen Gelhart, 314-576-0094. And then I've got Valvoline Express Care. Everybody knows where to get their oil changes. Let me remind you, it's Valvoline Express Care. Locations in Highland, Illinois, Warrenton, Missouri, Cape Girardeau, St. Peter's Parkway, Mid Rivers Mall Drive, Troy, Illinois, and Lee May Ferry Road. What I say to everybody is invest in the family. We're growing our family. It's getting bigger and bigger every day across multiple different platforms, despite the fact that they try to keep it down. I always say, God's going to figure out a way for me to work through these algorithms. There's got to be a way, and we just keep plugging at it. If you want to support our advertisers, and we certainly hope that you do because they make it all work, Valvoline-expresscare.com is where you get your coupons. But when it's time for an oil change, you just get out to Valvoline Express Care. Our good friend Tony Clark, 15 minutes from Bay to on your way, Valvoline Express Care. And then let's do GraceHauling.com, GraceHauling.com. Everybody knows Gary Schneider. GraceHauling.com for all of your rubbish and trash needs, whether it be commercial or residential. It's GraceHauling.com, GraceHauling.com, GraceHauling.com. Outstanding customer service. The reason you see those trucks all over St. Charles County is because people like doing business with Gary Schneider. GraceHauling.com, commercial or residential. Check them out. Now let me see if I can bring this man here in. I got to figure this out. So we'll do it maybe, how would we do this? There. Let me bring him in. There he is. And then we go this way. Boom. How does Isaiah do it? He's fantastic. Rick Bavitz, welcome to the show. You are a staple on Tuesdays. I apologize for being late. We had a lot to get to today. That was a fascinating conversation. It's different though because my rhythms are much faster. I always tell people when they come on the show, it's kind of difficult because my rhythms are very, very quick. So if people are listening to me and they get that pace that I have going, and then somebody comes in who's more methodical in the way they describe something, it just messes with people's rhythms. I think that might have happened just a little bit with Hugh Owen. Rick Bavitz keeps the pace. What's going on, Rick?
How are you?
Good, man. How are you?
Yeah, doing well. Did you enjoy your birthday weekend with your daughter?
I did. We had my daughter turned 20 years old, so we're at the melting pot. I ate way too much. I'm trying to diet now, Mike. I got to get my weight back in order, so that is the plan. But no, we had a great weekend. Life is good. I can't complain. Life is starting to take shape the way it always does. Rick, you know how it works. It's just you have the ebbs and flows, but right now life is good. What are we talking about today? What's on your mind? I know you got some kind of topic. Mike's going to jump in because Isaiah is ill. He was starting to feel funky yesterday, so he's taking off today, resting up for hopefully tomorrow. But what was on your mind today?
Well, last week we were talking. So much happens in a week. It's crazy.
Yes.
Honestly, especially finance, and we want to. We were talking about some different things. I think that it challenges the mindset of most people, especially now with the siloing and all the different things that are going on. And I think we're more so than ever. Right? We all know about siloing, and we know how they've separated people. We've seen it quite a bit. I would say a market increase in the amount of siloing, but even among people that agree, right? And so now they're just like atomizing, if you will, just all of the different, let's say, parties or slightly different variations on, belief systems to, just make us weaker. And so that idea of siloing is going on. And so when we start looking at some of the things and, we look at people who, are resistant to hearing things or maybe, they just fall into a channel. I think that that's a result of the siloing. Like, I think that Trump is part of the, the group that's going to enslave us and all that stuff. And, and I choose to kind of look at things in as much of a broader sense as I possibly can. I resist the idea of siloing. So just I will pull up stuff if I have to go out and actively bring things in so that I can see varying points of view and look deeper underneath things so that I can avoid that as much as I can. I mean, we all have some susceptibility to the gang counter gang or the the psyops and the various propagandas that are being thrown over us.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I notice is, and I talk about this with Trump all the time, whatever opinion you want to have of Trump can be reinforced. If you want to think that he's the devil, there's enough information out there to think he's the devil. If you think he is benevolent and trying to do everything for America, you can find that information out there as well. Very difficult to pin down what reality is nowadays because there are, as you said, silos. And if you fall into those silos, you can certainly convince yourself of whatever you want to believe, put it to you that way.
Yeah. And I mean, I probably in that sense, I tend to stick with what I can prove to myself or to others. I mean, if I can't prove it to myself, I don't really want to talk about it. I don't want to bring it up because I think that could be dangerous. So I look at the facts. I look at the things that I know have happened. I know that I can't read minds. I wish I could probably sometimes, but so I can't read people's minds. So to see what a person does and the actual things that they have done, and then turn around and imagine where they might be taking that. I can't do that. I don't think that works. It doesn't work for me, but also, have you ever heard of target fixation?
Mike, have you?
I don't believe I have heard.
All right, we're getting education. What is it?
So my dad was a combat pilot, and so combat pilots have to learn about target fixation or object fixation. Sometimes they call it, but it's sort of a natural survival instinct that your brain automatically locks in on threats, and then you track the threat, right? And panic and stress and things like that. I'm also a very highly qualified defensive pistol instructor, NRA certified in 3 different modalities with regards to defensive pistol instruction. So I can teach that type of stuff. And so one of the things that happens to people when you get into a fight or flight mode, the panic and the stress, you get tunnel vision, you could, freeze on a particular thing, you get a constriction of time, your auditory kind of goes down, right? And then your mind-body connection is, just more or less everything is kind of based on where you're looking, right? And so if you apply that to propaganda and psychology, and then you also look at why would a combat pilot need to know about that, or why would if you're in a gunfight, hopefully I'm never in a gunfight,
like in Idaho.
Like in Idaho, right? Exactly. That person who took over and at least neutralized the threat, got the person to run away or whatever. Once I read some of the details, I'm like, okay, I don't know what that was about, but bottom line is that those situations, if there had been another shooter around and the person wasn't trained in breaking down that fight or flight, then this actually happened, I think, in a Walmart in Las Vegas somewhere. I think it was in Las Vegas. There were 2 shooters inside of a Walmart, and the good guy was not aware of the other shooter. He hadn't really shown himself. So he was focused in on the one shooter. He took out that shooter, and the other guy came and popped him in the back of the head. So he didn't notice that, happening around him or whatever. And one of the things they have you do in pistol training is look right, look left. And that actually breaks your tunnel vision. It actually lifts some of that fight or flight. With target fixation, literally pilots who are on a bombing run, they're so focused on the target that they actually crash into the target. So if you kind of think of it in those terms, it could be extremely dangerous, obviously. But where I'm going with this is this idea, look where you want to go. That's really so you're not looking at the target. You know where the target is. You can kind of see it, but you're going to look straight ahead, right? Like those Blue Angels who all crashed into the ground, like all 6 of them. This is back in the 1970s. They were flying F-4 Phantoms, and the first guy hit the ground. He had some kind of target fixation going on, and they all followed in right behind him, and all of them died. Right. And so you want to look where you want to go. And I think of that in terms of, my life. I think, okay, I don't want to focus all my attention on all these threats. I want to know about them. I want to have situational awareness, but I also want to make sure that once I get some understanding of that I have an ability to sort of look at where I want to go or where I see things headed. And, we're in a time when we have, I'm going to say, I forget I think it's, I actually have it here somewhere. Only an idiot would fight a war on 2 fronts. Only the heir to the throne of the kingdom of idiots would fight a war on 12 fronts. Right. And so is our president fighting a war on 12 fronts, or is he fighting one war? Right. I mean, I can say that he's fighting a capital. There's a capital war going on. You have the Fed and all the different, components that have been entrenched in our, our economics. And again, I called it the fait accompli, or the coup de grace that happened in 1901, where, it had been decided what was going to happen. And now we've lived in this 125 years since then in this economic, a process of enslavement, so to speak. And so, when you start to look at these types of things and you go, okay, what's going on? Are we actually being saved? What are the things that are happening? And I look at those things, and I'm looking very specifically at particularly the things that people talk about the most that they're afraid of, like digitizing our economic system, right?
Yep.
But that could also be super good. I mean, people were afraid of Y2K. I remember I had a friend, very, very well off, lots and lots of money, and he completely shut down and went and lived in a cabin like the last month of 1999. And nothing happened.
I flew. That's how little I was worried about it. I flew into the Netherlands.
You flew into the Netherlands?
Yeah, I had on the Millennium, the Y2K situation. We flew into Europe, and we spent 2 weeks in Europe and spent the Millennium in the Netherlands, Germany, London. We were all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
I was not worried about it. I'll put it that way at all. Zilch.
Yeah, me either. Yeah, totally not worried about it. My buddy Joe was like off the charts. Now he's going to know I'm talking about him. We laughed about it later. So the internet, same thing. Like, again, these things can be used for good and for bad, but I think that the net effect of the internet, it has increased the benefits to society more than it's brought us down. And it seems to me that no matter what, let's say, I guess the globalists, let's call them the globalists, for lack of a better term, anybody who's a globalist, if you're listening, anytime you guys try to hide something, somehow it gets sussed out there in the internet. Like the internet exposes things. You can hide things as well. I mean, a bunch of people lost Bitcoin last week. They had a big Bitcoin attack that went against some older style wallets or something like that. And a bunch of people lost some money or whatever, but they can see where it is. They go, this is what we can see, the accounts and where the person put it, because it's transparent. Right. So even stealing something like that, there's probably a pretty good chance that person's going to get nabbed, and then all that Bitcoin is going to get returned. Right. So when you start to look at some of this stuff, and we look at the economics, as I've stated, and I think that if someone wants to disprove what I'm saying with regards to economics, then I would love to have a talk with that person. But economics is underpinning everything we do. From the moment, we're upright, we have to exchange with someone else, as a society. So economics is going to run everything. And even if you and I traded something, I've got some brass and some lead, and you've got some cigarettes. I don't smoke, but let's just say I did. We could trade, right? And that's what they were doing in Sarajevo back in the 1990s when that was all happening. And my family's from Yugoslavia, so that event in Kosovo and that first NATO bombed itself, right? You got to look at stuff like that and go, wait a second, what's really going on here? Nothing is as it seems, and there's this strategic deception that's going on. And I think that what we're seeing in large part is strategic deception. The good people have to do that, as well as the bad people, the bad actors and the good actors. And you're seeing gang counter gang operations. So if you guys have never heard of that, it goes back to the 1960s in guess where? Africa, when the Brits were trying to create more and more disturbances. And a guy named Frank Kitson started looking at some of the uprising that was going on. And he was, instead of looking at like what they had been doing and trying to figure out what they were going to do next, he started instigating new let's just call them this would have been the first versions of Al Qaeda, or the Mujahideen was where we took that next in the 1970s, where we started training, freedom fighters. They called them. What a nice euphemism.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to send those guys into like up to the borders of Russia in Afghanistan, and we're going to have them start create cross-border skirmishes. Why? Because we wanted Russia to invade Afghanistan. And so that's what the counter gang thing does, is it sort of like instigates things to happen. And then you get to see who the people are. And you can also obviously create lots and lots of chaos in the interim, where you can get away with all the raping of the resources, And so that's something that actually the gang counter gang, the FBI's COINTEL program, actually adopted the exact. There's a booklet, you can look it up. It's called Gangs and Counter Gangs by Frank Kitson, and it's a very short book. I think it's 100 pages. You can read all about it, and it's incredible what you learn when you read stuff. And then you can kind of go, all right, now let me apply some of this stuff. I try to apply as many things as I can to what I'm looking at, and I try not to get into that target fixation. And where the economics are concerned, I think that, again, we're being siloed. We have so many people that are calling out. I can guarantee you, every single person who says that Trump is trying to put us into a panopticon are conning us, not knowingly. They've been conned themselves into believing that. What I was going to say is, anybody who's coming from that position, look to see if they provide a solution, right? And I guess the other thing is, do we have an option other than Trump? Like, do you have another person, Rob, that you think that we could shift to? Could we jump the shark? Could we switch horses at this point in the game? In the race, and go, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to jump on to this guy's bandwagon.
No.
Do you have anybody in mind?
No. I mean, there's you're kind of stuck with what you're stuck with. That's why it's an interesting situation.
Yeah. Well, but again, like, if we look at all of these things, like, is it bad? It could be really good. And I've looked at this in a lot of ways, as far as the digital stablecoin and what exactly is going on. And again, these are things you have to trace all the way back to the beginning of the Trump administration, and you can start to see his. You were talking about the footprints. It's one of my favorite poems. I can't even read it out loud. I'll start crying.
Uh-huh.
It affects me so much to see that footprints. Right. I would walk around and carry that, and I think of my dad too. I think of the prodigal son, the story of the prodigal son, and those are the things that I try to focus on, and I try to go into things with God in my heart. And when I feel the disturbances emerge, and I've tried to become extremely sensitive. You and I have had a little bit of a conversation around this. Maybe I'll do one of my shows on this. But I focus in and have tried to become extremely sensitive to even the smallest disturbances in my heart, in my body. Because the moment that I can notice a disturbance, what I will say is, every single disturbance is me relying on something other than God.
Right. Of course.
It's something where I'm, I've moved, I've started to go down the hill towards the gate. My dad is in the house. He's with the brother that I resent, and who's older than me, and he's sort of taken charge, and I feel like I'm lacking power in my life, right? And here I am in this family unit where dad's the patriarch, and he's the first son, so he's automatically the favored son. So I feel a little bit left out, and so I've got ideations. I'm filled with resentment, and I've got ideations about what's beyond the gate, like of my father's property, and And I feel like I'm entitled to go out on my own and give me my inheritance now. Right. And we kind of know how the story goes, where he gets out of the gate, he gets down into the city, and he blows everything. Right. And what I want to try to do by noticing the disturbances and noticing that I have, a life that could be run on fear and my power of reason, right? Powered by reason, which is not as reliable as I would think. Right. Or I could be relying on God's love and his power in my life, right? And so if I can notice those disturbances, then I can get down on my knees, or even if I'm driving in the car, I can just simply pray out loud. God, direct my fear and set aside my pride and my ego so that I can get closer to you, and I can come back under your wing and direct my attention to what you would have me be, right? And so those are just some little prayers that I could say. But meanwhile, if I could do that before I leave the gate, before I get out off the property, then maybe I have a chance of not blowing everything and not having to come back up, having lost everything, right?
Right.
And so that's where I like to live, is in that space. And I have to associate myself. I have a family. They think I'm crazy. I try to tell them that I'm just a guy building an ark. And individuals are the only people with enough knowledge about their own lives to have a hope of making the right decisions for themselves.
I've been called crazy less lately. Mike, are you called crazy?
I'm going to say the same. Yeah. What do you say, Mike?
People are not calling me crazy as much as they used to. When I was,
they're not. I mean, but the idea of no amount of guidance or central planning can help that process along. And the central planners, that's really a better word for them. Have you ever heard of this guy called the Node Project?
Yes, but I don't know much about it. What is it?
It's just
I've only heard of it. I have no awareness of it.
There's a really good video that he's on YouTube. Just look him up, and it's really it's called the Society. It's like the first one you'll see. It's about the Fabian Society, and it's only 8 minutes long. And I mean, I have it on my my canvas, my mind map is what I call it. But I think we're in a battle here of the sovereigntists versus the globalists. And
you think Trump is on the side of the sovereigntists?
100%. I mean, I'm 1,000% positive that that's what he's on. And I wish that more people would realize that that's what's going on, because you can't, if you just look at his footprints of where he's been in his whole life. I mean, but if you don't want to go back that far, here's the thing. I mean, if the rest of your life depended on you listening to another person, right? That would have to be a pretty well-trusted individual, correct?
Yes.
So I don't really, other than my wife, right? I don't have another person like that. And like I just said, individuals are the only people with enough knowledge. Now, fortunately, the Christians who are listening, hopefully everyone could be a Christian, and I pray for the people who aren't, because at the end of the day, none of this really matters that much, right? If we get into a panopticon, right? Think about the people who lived through Auschwitz, right? And made it out the other side. And if you talk to any of those people or read their books or any of those things or hear what they've had to say, it was the this deep conviction that they weren't looking at their deaths, right? They weren't looking at that was present, but they were looking at the possibility that they could survive, right? And so that's what I do here. I'm looking at that's what I want to focus on. If I want to live a miserable life, then I'm going to sit there and I'm going to worry about that they're going to wrap up my, stablecoin. And if I explain, I'm going to explain how stablecoin works, right? And I'm going to explain some of the steps that were put in, or the processes that were deconstructed, and then things that were put in their place. And then I'm going to tell you about what is money, because most people don't even know what money is.
Measure of currency.
No.
Damn
No,
it.
it's three things, right? So it's a store of value, it's a medium of exchange, and it's a unit of an account. So you have to have all three of those things. And gold, like, great, love gold, but it's only a store of value. It can't actually operate as a medium of exchange. You can't carry around a bunch of sacks of gold or a file.
Change it for whatever the currency is that everybody's using.
Pardon me?
That's what I said. You can only use it in the sense that it will be measured by the currency that people accept. That's what the guy told me, the billionaire guy that I worked for out in California. I said, should you buy gold? He was worried about the world coming. We're all talking about what was going on back in those days. And he said, Robbie goes, if you're worried about those kind of things, like there's going to be a cyber attack, and all the electricity will be out. And he goes, what are you going to do with gold? Are you going to carry gold in and hand it to somebody for bread? Nobody's going to take your gold. They're going to take currency. He goes, so if you're worried about those types of things, he goes,
you can't delineate it small enough. That's really what it comes down to, is even in a digital sense, you can't delineate it. It has to be atomized down to pennies, right? In which case you would have a tiny little grain of gold. I mean, it would be probably not even be able to see it. It'd be so small, right? But you can have something that represents those things. And the dollar is not it anymore, right? And even the gold standard on its own was not something that was long-term. It was already failing based on the different things. We had a fixed rate of gold at about $20. And basically people would go to another, they would take the dollars and they would buy gold somewhere else and get it, redeemed at a higher rate. So they would go to, somewhere else where they could find gold for a higher, the exchange at a higher rate. And we were having to redeem those dollars at the fixed rate of $20. And so we were losing our gold reserves, right? We're flying out of the vault, because you had to redeem them in gold. And so that's a mechanism that doesn't work, right? So the idea of the dollar, was what came into play, where it's been abused. The idea that this dollar would represent a certain amount of gold, right? That's been abused. And so when we start looking at who's been running the show with regards to all of these things through the Fed, it is the British government, right? And so at a certain point in time, we're Americans, we're going to have to go back to calling ourselves colonists, because that's what we still are, right? And we need to be decisively disabused of the idea that our government, which we should call Britain, right, is our friend. And based on the specific and the consistent, like all the escalating actions that have been taken by the crown from the day after 1776, actually before 1776, right, all the way through today, okay? And this would go for the majority of all the politicians, both Democrats and Republicans, which we should call lords, right? So it's like we have these people that we're somehow submitting to, and we need to recognize that this is not what was set up in the first place. And so who's doing the things and who's talking about the things? I mean, talk is talk, but I've never seen so many people talking about Hamiltonian economics. I've never heard anybody talk about it outside of one particular organization, which was decidedly they did lawfare against this organization when they started to emerge as a possibility. And I'm talking about the Executive Intelligence Review, which was Lyndon LaRouche and these various people that were involved through him, right? And nothing's perfect, but at the same time, when we go back to the American system of political economy, those guys were the only ones talking about that. This is back when I discovered what they were. It was like the 1980s. And so, and they were trying to develop peace in the Middle East even earlier than that, in the 1970s, right? They were trying to develop peace in the Middle East, of all places, and involved with the various leaders behind the scenes. And so what did they do? They did lawfare against Lyndon LaRouche and threw him in prison, right? He ran for president like 7 times or something. But his economic, he was the first person to say just outwardly that the Malthusian theory, which is a reduction of population, right? That is culling the population. That is killing off people through famines and wars and
vaccines
and plagues, right? So those are the 3 things that he said, right? Were the things that will reduce our population, and we should encourage those 3 things. That's basically what he said. And you were talking about your previous guest was talking about evolution, and who were the people who were involved in evolution? Well, it was Darwin, right? But then who were his proponents? Thomas Huxley. Thomas Huxley became his bulldog. I mean, he basically promoted Darwin out the kazoo, and he started ostensibly his group, the X Club, is where we got the Fabian Society, which is where we got the London School of Economics, right? And so the London School of Economics, founded on what? On Darwinism, on evolution, and then one of their principal members was a guy named Herbert Spencer, who came up with this. He was the first person to say survival of the fittest, and so they inject that into the economics. And so again, the survival of the fittest.
What Soros said. So Soros said the exact same thing. He's from the London School of Economics, and when he went on 60 Minutes, they were questioning his ability to manipulate currencies, and they asked him how he felt about it. And he goes, I have to take away my morality with my business life. And he goes, because if I wasn't doing it, somebody else would be doing it. Same thing he said about confiscating the goods of Jews. As a Hungarian Jew, he said the same thing. He goes, if I wasn't doing it, somebody else would be doing it.
Yeah. So when you think of those things,
and they asked him if he believed in God, and he said no.
These are the same people that are managing our lives. They're the managers, the central planners of our lives. There's just a new set of bodies that keeps rolling off the assembly line that are groomed through, the elite culture, which creates, it's not even decisions people make. This is a cultural thing. And it's called habitus, where you could literally go through and live in a wealthy family, and you could accommodate or let's say become accustomed to these types of beliefs where the morality has to be removed, right? And I don't think that is the characteristics of our president.
You got to tell me what you think he's done concrete wise that would give people hope. Because even people that think he's changing over the economic system don't think he's doing it for good. They just have a vibe that they don't trust him. They just don't like him. So they think that everything he does is nefarious.
Again, if you're focusing on whatever you focus on, like you just said earlier, and I said it too, but in a different way, but whatever you focus on, you're going to get, right. And so that's spiritual right there. And so the people that focus on, they want to see the negative things. But if a person is largely responsible for directing our economy towards a different system, away from the London School, away from the central planning school, which was LIBOR, which is essentially London interbank offered rate. So that's how come the dollar has been debased so much, is because London gets to set the interest rate, and then they can basically lend out multiple claims against a single dollar, and we have no control over them doing that. Right? The new system that's been put into place under this new regime, right? We're looking at a regime change. Let's call it that. But the new regime is economic in nature. It's called SOFR, and replaces that, right? So this the secured overnight financing rate, and secure, meaning it has a direct pledge of value that's marked for every single dollar. So it's collateralized, right? Versus the LIBOR, which is not collateralized, it's unsecure. That's one of the reasons why there's so much.
You think this is based on stable coins? Is that where you're going with this? You think that is the
Well, that's the end result, because with money you have to have three things. You have to have a store of value. You know, you can't just you have to, that's not just stable coin. It's also it's where the Genius Act comes from. It's where the Clarity Act comes from. And then you had the fiscal runway, which was part of the big, beautiful bill. So those three things that you see happening, those are three things that he's done that actually created the runway for the new economic system to run on. Then it created the stable coin, right, where it actually was going to be the three things that money could be. It's going to be collateralized. So it's going to have a 1-to-1 ratio of value to something of value, right? And then the market structure, which is the plumbing. Like, we have to have the plumbing to be able to have the economy flow through the right channels. Right now, everything flows up to Britain. And I mean, if people don't believe that, then you've got to do some studying. I'm sorry. I mean, there's only so many of us that can sit here and talk all day long about these things. And if people just sit on their hands and don't pick up a book, don't look somewhere, don't try to follow somebody who has some other thing in mind, right? To understand what these things are. I mean, if you don't have money, I mean, can you live your life in today's society?
No.
Not at all, right? And you have now a person that, or a group of people, really. There's a bunch of people around Trump. I don't think all know what he's doing. I think there's just a handful of people that know Trump's master plan. Very, very, very few people, right? But we're ostensibly moving into a system where it's all being do you think you can go? I mean, do you think that if you went over to where I don't want you to get banned or anything like this, and I'm not trying to make any threat for doing this, but I'm saying, do you think that if somebody decided that they wanted to go over to the Federal Reserve Bank and detonate, the building, like, let's say, a controlled demolition, do you think that that's going to bring down the Fed?
No, because it's relatively digital anyway at this point, isn't it?
Well, very much so, but that's, yeah, it has to be repurposed, right? You probably couldn't even, do you remember? I mean, you remember Doge?
Yes.
Right. You remember Doge. Let me pull up the name of the,
Ben remembers Doge. Ben's listening in. He's got a degree in economics. I think he's got a degree in economics.
Who's Ben?
Ben Murphy.
Oh, he's one of the listeners to the show.
Yep. Been around politics forever.
Oh,
he's writing the Bitcoin policy for Ben Keithley.
I see. So he's a Bitcoin guy.
He's a Bitcoin guy.
A Bitcoin bro.
Yep.
Is he a younger guy or an older guy?
I think he's 60, mid 60s, mid
to
late
way.
60s. Yeah.
Wow.
Very handsome.
He's a Bitcoin. I mean, that's great to hear, right? So the history of Doge. Right. I wrote a little article about it. It was short because people were saying, oh, the president doesn't have the authority, to create Doge or whatever. And executive order, August 17, 2015. Who was president in 2015?
Obama.
Oh, no way. Really? So, he made an executive order where he created the Presidential Innovation Fellows Program.
By executive order?
By executive order. I'll give you the executive order, number 13704, signed August 17th, 2015. Okay.
And what did this do?
Huh?
And what did this do? this executive order that nobody pays attention to?
It just sat there. I mean, he had. I mean, it's such a tiny little. I think it was some kind of program to reward certain people who were innovative in culture, or how Obama was.
Yeah.
Right. But then fast forward, Trump on day one, right? January 20th, 2025. Executive Order 14158, the legal basis for restructuring the Presidential Innovation Fellows Program into Doge. So what did he do? He took an existing agency and he just repurposed it. That's
repurpose it, or
heretical. A heretic is a shortcut, right?
Right. Did he actually do that, or did he just put an executive order? Because as I'm understanding these executive orders, they don't go into implementation. It's like me writing a wish list out to Santa. If Santa doesn't wish list, it doesn't matter.
Do we not have troops or airplanes bombing Iran?
I believe so.
He's the president. I mean, he has a lot of executive power.
If they get it caught up in the courts, is what I'm saying. The executive orders don't really have any weight once the states start pushing back against them. That's what they tell me anyway. Because he's got an executive order out there right now, and I used to read it on my old podcast, where he said if China is complicit in trying to steal the election of 2020, he wrote this big long order. I read about it in my original podcast. Well, he's now saying that happened. So they would take all of the property away from all of the Chinese. It would come into American hands, this and that and the other. I don't think any of that's going to happen. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think any of that's going to happen. If you read the executive order about the elections that he wrote, I'll try to find
I haven't gotten there yet. Spent the whole week doing this. Look, like really understanding these things. And there are like I said, that's one of the things that he's, when you say, what has Trump done in a concrete sense? I mean, he's fighting a gigantic, if I showed you this, you'd see this is just a part of what I've put together. But I mean, he's got the Capitol War, he's got the Fed, which includes the Fed, the City of London, there's a fourth turning. I mean, he's got the IRGC, the Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, just came to the table for the first time in 25 years to say, we're willing to potentially stop fighting everybody wants an economic solution. That's really what it comes down to. And this is why economics is such a fascinating, our friend Ben Murphy being, majoring in economics. I forget what you said was his, he studied economics. Same thing. It's just this idea of economics. Everybody that's fighting over anything, it's like, hey, make it make sense economically and I'll stop fighting. And, and so there's the Abraham Accords. There's a coalition of people in the Board of Peace. I mean, he's bringing all of these Arab partners. If you produce peace among the Arabs, principally Iran is driven by the IRGC. Iran is at the centerpiece of most of the conflict among the Arab states. What's that? Who's funding that? Oh my gosh, it's not Britain again. Britain again. Yes, it's Britain again. And mutually assured destruction is the nuclear doctrine, right? We all follow this idea of mutually assured destruction. Trump is trying to develop mutually assured defense, because what does that do? If you could defend yourself against all things, including nuclear weapons, then what kind of power does that put into your hands? Holy cow, right? I mean, think about it, right? Mutually assured defense is different than mutually assured destruction, right? And so we've got Venezuela, Colombia, Cuba, the whole Caribbean. We've got the Gulf of America. I mean, why did he way out in the beginning call that the Gulf of America? Do you think that he named that day? No, I think that he's probably drawn out a map of the entire globe and looked at all of it. Greenland and Canada. Where do those two things figure in? The European union, economic, is it an economic union? It used to be called the EEC. At a certain point, they dropped the word economics out of the EEC. I wonder why. Because they were crashing their economic system and they're about to implode because of it, right? And they're in such bad shape now they can't even protect their borders to the degree that now there's invasions happening.
Did you see the thing from Thomas Massey? Let me read this to you on that note, because I wonder if you know this, if this plays into your thinking or plays against your thinking. Give me 1 second. I'll find it here. Because he's basically saying, let me see if I can find it. It shouldn't be too far down here. He wants to repeal the Smith-Mundt Act, by the way, Thomas Massey. He put out something about that recently.
And he's still in office, right?
He is, yeah, I think until January, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, till January when they sign. That's the other thing, the midterms. Oh my gosh, that's a huge theater of battle right now. That I'm going to say there's one front and many theaters of battle, which is, I've heard this described this way. So this is, these ideas that I'm talking about are obviously not all mine, right? I read so much material and I bring about so much. I try to bring in pound information. But go ahead and read that.
Okay, so this is from Thomas Massey. It says, 2 weeks ago, before migrants from Morocco invaded Quetta, the GOP passed a bill with $40 million for Morocco and a committee report advising. So let me read that one more time with a less bobble. 2 weeks before migrants from Morocco invaded Quetta, which is Spain, right? The GOP...
Yeah, it's on the north coast of Morocco, though.
Right. 2 weeks before migrants from Morocco invaded Quetta, the GOP passed a bill with $40 million for Morocco and committee report advising. And then he lays out what is in the report, HR 8595, making appropriations for national security, Department of State, and related programs for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2027, and for other purposes. And then he's got some language in it. It says, the committee notes the historic alliance between the United States and Morocco and formalized in 1786 by the Moroccan-American Treaty of Peace and Friendship. And then he highlights this part of it. It says the committee notes that the Spanish-administered cities of Quetta and Melilla are located in Moroccan territories and remain the subject of Morocco's long-standing claim. So basically, the language is saying that the parts that they're taking over in Spain belong to Morocco already, and that is behind the invasion of Spain most recently that everybody is talking about. He's basically saying it was funded by the United States in this legislation.
It's possible.
And why would that be? That's what I was going to ask anybody if they knew what that was. It was if
the first thing is look at a map, right? If we look at a map, which is the most important thing to do when something's going on, look at a map, because most people, when they heard this news, thought that these migrants went across the Straits of Gibraltar. This is the impression people had because I heard people talk about it. They didn't look at a map. They just thought, these are migrants and went into Spain. There's a lot of migrants already in Spain, and it could have happened like that, right? Where they just started invading little territories there, on the mainland of Europe. But no, this was, if anybody has any awareness of African history, and like what you just said, I'm not going to be able to speak to exactly what you're saying because I'd like to read it first, but just my first pass on it would be, I think that those countries were invaded by Spain and by principally imperialistic invasions all across, all the way down to the tip of Africa for their resources. Northern Africa is principally dominated by France, but you have this little tiny piece that and Morocco as well, that's just in a general way. But Morocco uses the French franc, and they speak French, a lot of the time. So think about it. That's called Francophone Africa, or Francafrique. It's also called, with a IQUE at the end, not freak like it sounds.
All right, hang on, because I want to get this, because I want to get your opinion on this. So on that same stream, Thomas Massey posted that on social media. He posted it on X, And then somebody replied to it, because he's basically saying that money was being allocated for this invasion. So the United States of America paid for this invasion. That's basically what he's getting at. And somebody said, translation, CIA now actively subverting Moroccan regime, government with congressional approval. And Thomas Massey put the bullseye sign on top of it.
I mean, it's what I was already thinking before you said it, because these people are entrenched in so many places, and the more, this is a family-friendly show, so we don't use curse words, but the what kickers, right, that go around and cause trouble, that chaos is a ladder. I think, as somebody said that, right? So. You ratchet it up, and there's so many things. And if you can continue to do operations like this and create skirmishes, I mean, there's other reasons besides Trump to potentially do these things, but ridding these countries of these things, right? You can surely bet that there's activity going on. I've already talked about West Africa, which is just, Africa's huge. So this is quite a bit south, but it's in that, that section that's just below, you have Morocco, and then right below that you have the Sudan, and then you have the West African countries, and they're looking to create an economic renaissance for themselves in Africa, right? In West Africa, Burkina Faso and Mali and Nigeria and all these places, right? Niger, that are right there. And they even have now a commitment from the Russian government to build them nuclear plants. Nuclear plants, we know, going all the way back to Eisenhower, could potentially even power desalination and create lots more desalination. Like, we could see a complete, and maybe not in our lifetimes, but we could certainly see where that desert area, which used to be green, and then is now desert, could then be returned to green again. And then maybe the people in Burkina Faso who own the gold that they're living on, right? They basically own the land that they live on, but everyone's stealing the gold, and they're the third largest producer of gold on the planet. But none of them even have running water or bathrooms. They have dirt floored houses.
Doesn't make any sense. Well, explain this to me, though, because this one I was going to ask anyway. I was going to talk about this. What would be the purpose of funding a border invasion of Morocco into Spain? I don't understand the geopolitical significance of this, but Thomas Massey is saying this was funded on June 23rd through the 26th, and the sponsor of the bill was Republican Baez Balart Mario Diaz Balart. I don't know who this. I know who she is.
So the bill is funding the invasion.
Yeah, but basically funding a CIA backed operation to invade the borders of
destabilizing Spain. Any kind of assertion that Morocco might have for self-determination. It's just like I said in that I wrote it down for myself because I thought it was important for me to say it in a way. I wrote this for myself, and then I'll read something else too. But Americans or colonists need to be decisively disabused of the idea that our government, which is Britain, is our friend, based on the specific, consistent, and escalating actions taken by the Crown. This is just one more of those actions from late 1775 through today. This goes for the majority of politicians, both Democrats and Republicans, who we should consider lords. So this is not just Americans. This is colonists. So the British government still looks at North Africa and the entire continent of Africa as a colony, a group of colonies. They still think that way. They still think that, Thomas Huxley and Herbert Spencer, and all of the people of his ilk, when you look at who was he running with? H.G. Wells. He was running with
On the World in 80 Days.
H.G. Wells' movie
Flat Earth can't be done.
all about this is some of the first psyops that were purportedly whatever you want to call it, executed against Americans were because of H.G. Wells, and his a Fabian. And then you take the economic side, which was, of course, Cecil Rhodes, who brutalized all of Africa. I mean, he stole all the diamonds from the Africans, made himself so wealthy that he's been dead for 124 years, and he's been able to fund Oxford, the Rhodes Trust, and all of these elitist and Yale and all the people that come through the Rhodes scholarships. That
it's a big club, and you ain't in it.
You ain't in it. That's a perfect. You're getting good at this, Rob. I mean, you were already good at it, but still, you're getting better and better every day. And then who was subscribing to this type of ideology was John Maynard Keynes. He was a Keynesian, right? And so we literally are operating under Milton Friedman and J.M. Keynes. As far as he was a eugenicist. He was, hung around these guys, the Fabians. I mean, they were one part of that one club that has two sides to the door. One's on Main Street. It's on the corner of the city. The one door that says Fabian Society on the outside is on Main Street. The other door's on First Street, and it says the Rhodes Trust on the front door of that. But it's the same building. It's like the same guys that in Louisiana and New Orleans, and they were what's his name? Lee Harvey Oswald would go out one side of the building on Main Street, and the CIA was on First Street and the other side of the same building.
Talking about New Orleans?
Yeah, in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And if you ever read that book by
there's a guy that actually does a video where he goes, "Did you know this?" And he's walking out of the buildings. He goes, "These buildings are so close to each other." I'm like, "Wow, kind of crazy."
Yeah, I just the name is escaping me this second, but the guy who wrote the book is the guy who prosecuted Shaw where they made the movie with JFK about him.
Who was that, Mike?
Kevin Costner.
Kevin Costner played him in the movie. What was that guy's name?
Garrison. It was
that's right.
John Garrison?
William John, something like that. Garrison?
Yeah. Garrison. So Garrison was the only person to bring any kind of charges against anybody during the entire plot and aftermath and to date. And he basically, his life was threatened, and he was probably, potentially going to get killed, but Shaw got acquitted, right? Because nobody would really, there's a few movies.
Tommy Lee Jones in the movie, by the way. Tommy Lee Jones, for the people that watch the movie.
Yeah, Tommy Lee Jones played Shaw. Joe Pesci played what's his face. I used to know all these names, but anyway.
Jim Garrison's the guy's name.
Jim Garrison, yeah, James Garrison.
I got to read these advertisements, and then we got to get Mike off here. Mike said he's only going for another 3 minutes, so hang on.
Okay.
Joneswater.com, joneswater.com for all of your air and water filtration needs. Everybody knows, right? Everybody knows to go to joneswater.com. 636-899-1040, 636-899-1040. This is air and water filtration, part of the family, been around since 1995. So if you want clean air and clean water in your home or business, obviously you go to joneswater.com. 636-899-1040. As he likes to tell me every time, Rob, don't forget, you'll be the filter or you'll buy the filter. If you want to do business with Everett in the state of Missouri, St. Charles County, Lincoln, Franklin, Warren, St. Louis, and Jefferson. If you go to the east side, the dark side, Madison, Monroe, Jersey, and St. Clair. Joneswater.com, joneswater.com. And then we have ECS Roofing. No visuals today. I feel a little naked without the visuals. So I'll just say ECS Roofing. This is our general contractor for roofing, siding, gutters, garage doors, you name it. ECS Roofing and Exteriors. You can check him out on Facebook. We love him because he's conscientious, gives you a great price, does great work, been around for 30 years. And as he tells me all the time, Rob, the game in roofing, this is the game. They knock on your door after a storm. It's how they get people to pay attention to their business. They knock on your door. They say, I see a problem with your roof. They say that we're going to get the insurance companies to work with you. We're going to get you a free roof. The insurance companies are coming. He said they don't even know what they're talking about. That's all just a big scam. He goes, however, I've been an insurance adjuster for many, many years. If I go on your roof or if I look at your roof and I say the insurance companies are going to work with you, it's over. I know they're going to work with you. That means it's real. You don't have to waste all your time with all the other nonsense. ECS Roofing and Exteriors, 314-486-3567. 314-486-3567. When it's time for a new roof, new gutters, new siding, new garage doors. It's always ECS Roofing and Exteriors. If you want to check out their business, just go to Facebook, ECS Roofing and Exteriors. Okay, close it up. Give me your 30-second end the show, 2-minute end the show, 3-minute end the show, Rick, and we'll have you back on next week, because I know you and I, we can go on for 10 hours. My wife always says when Rick calls, she goes, the movie's over.
Right. Well, I'm going to say that this is, for today, I would say we need to have if you want to do a full show on this, or this takes a lot of understanding. And I think that people forget what I've said here. There's a process from the U.S. perspective is to control the pricing of our own currency. Trump, has got SOFR instead of LIBOR. That has to be pegged to the Treasury. And so he has to get rid of all of the offshore euro dollars that are sucking money out of our Federal Reserve. That's the lender of last resort. Is now those dollars are getting stolen globally, right?
Can I say this? Can I just, because I think the audience might just boil down to where people can understand it. You believe that Trump is looks at sovereignty for the U.S. economy, sovereignty in general, and that he is moving around the global chessboard in a way to get away from the Federal Reserve and the British Crown and the City of London to return sound money back to the United States in a sovereign manner. And I guess other countries would have their sovereign money too. That's why I brought up the Doge and the repurposing, because he's an executive. We get distracted with certain things. You ask me a question and we never get back to it. But the idea that executive order is very powerful, and he's using it to the fullest extent that the law allows. And if he does something that's beyond that authority, which he has done very few times, he was sued and he got struck down. So, in some cases it was correct. In other cases it wasn't correct, like the most recent one. But the idea here is that he is repurposing things. He can't just get rid of the Fed. He can't just stop taxation. He's infiltrated the Fed with Warsh, and he's infiltrated the Treasury with Scott Bessent, and he's turning these people. These people are out in the economics, the global economics, and they are restructuring. They're wanting to control the pricing of our own currency. They're wanting to control the pricing of our own collateral, which is LBMA. That's also London Bullion Market Association. All this stuff is still in London. So they're between the Chinese and us. They're wanting to take control of gold and silver, because we need to have control of those so we can have correct pricing of the stable coins. Then he wants to also control the price of the thing that gives the flow of credit some value, which is oil. And then beyond that, maybe uranium, right? So, but oil is the big thing. And so look at all of the things that he's doing, and you take those three things to free the world from the British financial credit architecture. We're in a credit architecture.
Do you think he can accomplish this in the time that he has left in a way that it can't be quickly undone?
I hope so. It's 2.5 more years. If we don't win the midterms, like, this is my kind of argument with people who want to bag on the president for, let's say, their own. I mean, maybe they have the belief system that he's going to turn this thing against us later. We can't worry about that. We have to worry about, like, if there's a pilot saying, again, another pilot saying that my dad would tell me, when you have an emergency in the air, you have the rest of your life to figure it out. You get it?
Yeah. So you're saying it's time.
We're in a plane that's in an emergency, and if we don't figure it out before it crashes, then we're screwed. So we have to do everything we can. The midterms are huge. It is the main thing that we have to focus on, getting over the midterms, because then to answer Mike's question, Mike, right?
Yeah.
We would need to get through that. If we don't get through that, then we have to sort of reshuffle the deck and figure out how to keep.
So who do we need to get in the midterms? This is another thing I don't understand, because I don't believe the two-party system. I just think that's all farce.
I don't either, but there are going to be a few things. What we need is the Clarity Act to go through. If we can get that done first, that's tremendous, because then that gives us the plumbing for us to actually move a little further, to encroach a little further. He's got a tremendous amount going on, obviously globally, and every single one of these pieces. And if you don't understand what it's about, just first think, okay, how does this fit into this financial system? Because all the money's flowing to Britain through all of these places, and our gold is priced. Everything is going through Britain. All of these structures are getting taken down. So he's doing that. He's orchestrating that. It's an unfinished symphony. So if we can get to the point where all the things are repurposed, I mean, Bill Pulte, another player in this thing that people completely don't understand. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and all that stuff is super important, because why? London gets to decide the par rates on our loans and stuff. It's nutso, all of the infiltration that they have that Trump is literally trying to get rid of, and that's as close to 2 minutes as I can get.
Why? Last question then. Sorry, Mike.
That's all right.
All of the Zionists around him, because we look at that and I'm like, he's just surrounded by people with one, either a political or religious ideology. They're surrounding him. They're everywhere. That's just everything that he talks to is just Zionist after Zionist after Zionist after Zionist. Why? What's going on with that? And I'm not saying it's even anything bad. I just don't understand it. What is the purpose for this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in every respect, keep your friends close, your enemies closer. We don't know who the good actors in that group, the people who have become converted spies, the people who are still potentially his full-blown enemy, or the people that are infiltrators and things like that. So that are trying to get on his good side. We could also, on the gang counter gang, we could be doing gang counter gang against them too. So we have this, Trump is, I honestly, I don't think, and I've studied presidents, and people that might hear me say this, and pardon any Democrats that are, maybe you're my clients. I don't know if you came on this show to hear if I was, somehow, somebody else, this is who I am. Right. And I don't necessarily talk about everything, but I don't ever lie. So to my clients about this stuff, I just don't talk about it if they're not interested in this point of view. But our president, I can't imagine a president of this caliber with this large scale plan facing the same thing. I wouldn't want another person doing it.
Well, I think this we agree with 100%.
I mean,
when I watch him, I say to myself, I marvel because, and I marvel from a political standpoint. Now, you're right. The people say 5 and 60 chess. I fully admit that there are things that he does that make me absolutely insane. But I always leave that door crack for some genius behind the scenes, because he did gain my trust at a time when I didn't have any. He did gain my trust in the year 2016 with the way he was going about things. There was something that drove me into the sphere of Donald Trump. So I leave that door cracked. Isaiah and I talk about it all the time. I said, man, there's some things that just drive me nuts about this guy, but I leave that door cracked because I don't know the scenario that he's under. Right? I don't.
You know what? I have a feeling he turned Powell right before Powell left. And I don't know exactly when it happened, but remember he filed charges against him or whatever he did.
Broke him.
And then Powell made a comment that he wanted to be like what's his name? Volcker. He wanted to be a transitionist, more or less, is what he was saying. And then he brought in Warsh, who has repudiated Keynesianism on 3 multiple fronts. And now he's doing exactly what they don't want in London, which is hold the rates where they are. And potentially, if he wants to get really militant, he's probably going to drop rates, which is going to just tidy them up. But basically, he's outnumbered. He's the only guy there, with Powell still there. Maybe that's the reason Powell stayed, was to kind of give a leg up to Warsh, because if he believes that he's actually, somebody who could have been the person who transitioned into a new system, like where there's a very, very interesting way to look at it. There's $2, right? There's the dollar we've been used to, and that is basically robbing everybody of their inheritances and robbing everybody of their futures.
Yes.
And then there's this new dollar. It's like the tale of $2, where we have the possibility to rebuild our financial structure, our money, so that it actually means something when we save money, and we actually earn something when we save money. And then these banks, when they lend it, they have some collateral we don't have to worry about. Everywhere you turn, there is massive risk. There is no place to go in the counterparty risk, they call it. If you put money one place, there's a counterparty that's actually co-signing or extending the risk. And so it's enormous. And so when you start to look at all of these things, there are systems at play, and gold is not the answer. It is part of the answer, right, but it's not the answer to go back to the previous system. I mean, we have to be in a new system. We're in a new society, and that's what I'm really, I think that in that sense, if we can stay firmly rooted in our faith, and just, which would make us fearless, like David facing Goliath, because that's what this is. This is David facing Goliath. And there's a few people that are, let's say, a composite or whatever, an amalgam of people that are around Trump, but not very many. And so we have to, he's building a coalition. And as long as we can keep moving in that direction. So yeah, I hope we can get to the point where he steps, the other option is he could have so much support. I just want to finish with this, because Bismarck, who was in Germany, a great book called Golden Iron, talks about the fact that the first 2.5 years or 2+ years of his time leading Germany, he was extremely unpopular, like to the degree that Trump is unpopular. Once he turned things around, there's something that you need to understand about Trump, and I think he understands this better than anybody, but this has to do with Bismarck. That's 1864 to 1866, where he unified all the Germanic tribes, and everybody hated his guts until, right? And understand, the military continues policy when politics and diplomacy fail. That's Clausewitz. I quoted that guy when I was at Dave's thing that night, right?
Yep.
What did Bismarck do? Right? He provided the glue and the support, and then he started winning. And when you win, people jump on.
No doubt.
And so that's the thing that I think that we need to start getting to understand, is that the people that maybe hate his guts, I was never going to vote in my lifetime. I like back in the 2008s, the 2000s, and then into the early teen, like it wasn't until about 13 or maybe 12, the NDAA thing kind of ruined me, where Obama was concerned. I'm like, okay, no different than George W. Bush. He was the third. That's when I said to everybody, he's George W. Bush's third term.
They're all the same with a different perspective, but it's
and
all
so when Hillary started running, I'm like, okay, great. Now we've got 4 terms of George Bush, and we have the Harpy, and she's going to come in, and she's just basically going to do the same stuff. I mean, she had that, what's her name? Samantha Powers, and she had Slaughter. I mean, she had all these people around her sphere,
those are club members,
her orbit, that were just these heinous Atlantic Council, Rhodes Scholar, Fabian Society, all the same people.
Yep.
So when you start to look at it, and it was like, I'm voting for this guy because, that's basically the only shot we have. She'll just take us right down into serfdom. We were basically that close. And so if you've read the book, Road to Serfdom or whatever, which most people never read any of these books, but I don't like to, reason I asked you about that trust thing is I don't like to rely on people, even people I trust. Maybe their understanding is going to be different when they read something, and so I want to read stuff myself. Right. And that's really, I want the situational and awareness. If I have people that I have to protect, I want to make sure that I've seen all of the information.
Okay. Right? You got to keep us updated every week you keep us updated, because I'm skeptical. Let's be honest with you, I'm skeptical, but I believe that you know exactly what you're talking about. I do believe that. I know that you know.
Well, but I mean, suspend your disbelief, though. That's what you're going to have to do. I mean, you watch movies all day long and you suspend your disbelief. So I hope you enjoyed Apocalypse Now over the weekend.
I did. It was very complicated for me. I was like, wow, that's a strange movie, especially at the very end.
Did you watch the reboot one or the?
I don't know. It was just came up on what we paid $4 to watch it.
Okay.
Probably on
anyway.
Prime.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say you probably have to watch it again. It's one of those ones where it is extremely complicated, and it took me a few times. I've seen it 50 times, literally 50 times. So
I have to rub my wife's feet during movies, and sometimes that distracts me. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, well, let's not get too the family.
We cannot watch a movie without me rubbing her feet.
But I mean, I will ask you. I mean, I don't think an hour is enough, and you leave it up to you. It's your week. It's your show.
Maybe we'll just set aside time aside here in the not too distant future where we just do a show together. Be me, you, Isaiah. Maybe we'll bring in a little panel. We'll just talk through these things and just so people can pepper you with questions. You're so much further evolved in the history of it all, and in the finances of it all, and the currency of it all, and the economics of it all, that it's hard for me to really do anything but listen. Mike, do you kind of feel that way? I mean,
absolutely.
I don't even really know what questions to ask you, because you have so much information that noggin in you.
Just trying to absorb it all.
Exactly. And I usually go back and I try to absorb what you're saying. So you're just at a different level sometimes. And, I do that with certain things that I'm really interested in. And I don't realize that I'm talking through these things that people are like, what the hell is he talking about? I get that way with you sometimes because your mind has got so much information in it that you can bounce from one subject to another. And sometimes, unless you go back and really study what you're saying, it's hard to follow the ins and outs of the conversation. Would you agree with that, Mike? I mean, that's just kind of
absolutely.
I do the same thing. But
if you have another minute, I'm just going to show you a diagram that I drew for the show. I made, not drew, but let me find where the StreamYard is. And
John Wick wants to know is Trump manipulating the Iran war to keep crude prices at $80 a barrel to keep Russia stable?
1,000%. Yeah, he and
John Wick for the win. How about John Wick?
No, I love John Wick. Right. I'm glad. Welcome, John. I was hoping you'd come over. So let me pull this up here. I just want to be able to get on the right because I have two screens. Entire screen, screen one, thing one, and thing two. There we go. Yeah, the oil is being manipulated like crazy. And, again, you can always say, oh, is this for nefarious reasons? Oh, is he doing this to get rich? Maybe. But is it going to benefit me? If he gets rich and he benefits me at the same time, I could care less if he gets richer over it.
To be honest with you, if we have a stable currency, it's one of my complaints when I started doing the show. I didn't realize it. When you have, just for everybody out there that may be in this situation, when you have a lot of money at some time and you don't even think about money, you're not looking at a check account, you're not checking account, you're not worried about it. For your life, you have way more money than you need. And that's kind of how I lived my life for 20, 25 years. You go through a divorce.
All see this?
Yeah, you go through a divorce, you have all these things, and all of a sudden
you're looking at Robb's got to put it up on the screen.
Yeah, I'll pop it up there. And then you go through a divorce and you're looking at money again. You start to really look at how much the dollar has been defaced, devalued. And you start to look at that and go, that's just ridiculous. If I had this much money, it's like my first house is now worth, I bought a house out at Winghaven at the time. We paid, I want to say it was $282,000 is what we paid for that house. I had a $1,680 house payment. That's now worth $600,000 because I bought it 25 or 26 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's like 3 times the price almost. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just think it's phenomenal.
Well, I mean, that's the thing about Warsh is he said some things that like inflation is a choice. He said that publicly. So the fact that he didn't get, people probably want him off. They want him out of the Fed before he even got there. He managed to get through. And then interestingly, at first I thought, why did Powell stay behind? To hurt Warsh? I now have a suspicion that he's there to help Warsh. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You able to put that up there so people can see it?
I'm hitting it, but it's not coming on stage. I got Mike off the stage. I got everything messed up here. Hang on a minute. Isaiah, darn you. Where's the 3-picture screen? Is this it? I don't understand what's happening. All right, there's 1, 2. Get everybody a look. Work up close. There's the 2. Where's the 3-picture screen? It just went away?
I don't know.
I don't understand. Mike, I don't know what happened to us. Oh, I know why.
I mean, the people that you want to protect the most, the people that are really important to this.
There it is.
Are Scott Bassett. There we go. So here's my.
I'm producing my own show now. Check this out.
Nice. So here's my diagram with money in the middle, and you got the old dollar and the new dollar right in the middle. You've got gold over here. Gold was only one of these 3 things. It was a good store. It's an amazing store of value. Should you own gold? I think so, a little bit, but it's not. It doesn't work with a ledger. You can't keep track of it like, with transparency, and it has no medium of exchange, or very, very terrible at being a medium of exchange. The dollar is a good medium of exchange, and you can keep it a ledger, but it's got no value now, right? That's why we have inflation, and why that house is so much more expensive. I mean, if you start reducing inflation, stablecoin does all 3. Okay. And so that's really kind of similar to, when you think of the greenback era, right? So where we were tying things to that, and then you were able, or the silver, if you remember the silver dollar thing that was put into place, that all that stuff went away when Bretton Woods was gotten rid of by Nixon.
Yep.
Right. So, and all I can tell people, and you and Mike and anybody else, is you have to start. It's repetition. I mean, literally, that's the best way to learn this stuff is repetition. You know these terms. You've heard euro dollar. You won't be hearing about LIBOR anymore because now it's gone. And now you have SOFR instead. We could not have any hope of doing anything with the finance system if we had LIBOR. Okay. Now we have SOFR, which will be basically the transactional way that they can do stablecoin, right? So it's the benchmark interest rate that gets set, and it's 1 for 1. So we can literally, it's gonna have secured, collateralized, pledged capital. So it's a repo system where if you don't pay it back, you lose your collateral. That's like when you hear the word repo, that's good. It's just like a bank who repossesses your car if you don't pay the bill. We don't have that now in our financial system. And then what we're seeing is basically the Federal Reserve being repositioned as Pax Silica initiative. So that by itself is crazy. That means peace, right? Pax is the Latin word for peace. And wouldn't it be nice? I mean, the idea that we said before, which was war is the continuation of policy when politics and diplomacy fails, right? So and so that's really what we have, is this system of transition that we're in. I'm so excited about it, I can't even sleep at night. That's how excited I am about this. I'm serious, man.
Hang on, I got to get you out of here. All right. I like that you're excited. Let's leave it right there. And I got to give this up for everybody. This is Mike for sticking around. And Mike, last minute, I reached out to him at hour before the show started. I said, "Hey, man, if you can help me out just with clips and being another voice on the show, because 3 hours of one person's voice can get a little overwhelming. So I need a little break up every now and then." Keeping the Republic. Find this on Amazon. Where's the other place you can get it, Mike?
KeepingTheRepublicBook.com.
KeepingTheRepublicBook.com. Again, Citizen's Guide to Keeping This Country Free. I think it's I think
is that Mike's book?
That's Mike's book.
Oh, I'll have to buy that book,
You
Mike.
have to get this book, and this should be in libraries. This should be in our schools. This is the deal. This is the one thing that is missing out of our education system. Well, it's not just one. There's many. Yeah. But one thing that we've got to understand is our role in a government that's up by and for the people. If you lose that, then you're just like every other country. I don't know why we're waving the flag and getting all excited. If you just give over your entire country to an elite, which at some point we've done in this country, maybe Rick is right. We're trying to move that back to a sovereign country. I certainly hope that would happen, but we get ourselves into trouble because we don't know how to be citizens. And I'm as guilty as anybody. I'm not pointing fingers. For 50 years, I did not pay attention to what was going on at all. And now I think back to myself and go, man, what in the world?
I'm in the same boat with you.
We kind of learned at the same time.
A rising tide lifts all boats.
Lifts all boats. So, I think it was that Reagan?
Is there a better place to buy that book, Mike, than Amazon?
Right now, Amazon's as good as any. I make the same amount no matter where it's at right
now. Got it. Okay.
But if you don't like Amazon, you go to what's the name of the website?
KeepingTheRepublicBook.com.
KeepingTheRepublicBook.com.
Love it.
KeepingTheRepublicBook.com. All right. If you want to get a hold of Rick for financial advice, I'm going to give you a second here, Rick. 314-671-0525. YourCaringAdvisor.com. 314-671-0525. You can kind of tell Rick knows what's going on in the world. And then finally, when it's time for lunch, and it is time for lunch, it's a little past time for lunch. Now it's kind of right around time for lunch. Moe's Pizza in Washington, Missouri. This is Mike and Brenda Johns. They've been so great to us. I think everybody here knows who they are. God owns the place. He just works there for any kind of banquet activity, any kind of gathering. They have space available for birthday parties, anniversaries, political meetings, and Bible studies at the corner of Grand and 5th in Washington, Missouri. Great pizza, great salads, great burgers, great sandwiches, great ice cream. Moe's Pizza in Washington, Missouri, as I like to say, a landmark in Washington, Missouri. When it's time for lunch, get there. All right, gentlemen. Woo! That's all right. We've been spending. I do a 3-hour show, and it's been 4 hours for it's like half the time we go 4 hours. It's the craziest thing.
I think you're dangerously close to just having to say you have a 4-hour show, Rob.
I know, and you know what ends up happening is without real long commercials. It just, you get into conversations like you would around like I like to get around conversations to talk about things that are interesting to me, and I can go on forever. And when you have people that have opinions like Rick does and like Mike does and like Isaiah does, and then the guests that we bring on, all of a sudden without interrupted, and you can actually think and really explore things, the conversations end up going much longer than you anticipate. Because you always, every morning when I wake up, you're like, I want to keep people entertained for 3 hours every day. I want them entertained and informed for 3 hours, so that even if they don't like one segment, like somebody might not like the segment with creation and evolution, we come back with Rick. If they're not into either one of those, maybe they're interested in the media. Maybe they're interested in the conversation about Donald Trump. Maybe they're interested in the conversation about the CIA or whatever. And you try to keep people interested. You would think 3 hours would be hard to fill. And now we're doing 4 hours. And if I don't knock it off, it's going to be 5 hours. So, gentlemen, have a great day. Mike, I really, really appreciate you coming on, brother. I owe you one.
No problem. Happy to help out.
You got it. I owe you one. Rick, great to see you. I'll call you later on.
Thank you very much.
All right, everybody. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. on The Robb Carter Show.